and HD1 Burlington, Philadelphia. A Beasley Media Group station. Broadcasting live from the Comcast Business Studios. Powering possibilities. 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com. Now, Andrew Salchunas, 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
What's up, everybody? I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchunas again here on the Midday Show on 97.5 The Fanatic, taking you through 10 to 2 today as we continue on this wonderful late February week while the NBA is just getting wrapped up its All-Star break. It's been a couple days since we've seen the Fly Guys in action. We're still waiting for the offseason to really kick in for football. And, hey, at least we got the beginning of spring training. And there's plenty to get into. And I want to start with this Eagles offseason. And this little piece that I had seen on, it really was social media at first. And I sent this to Tom Alford, who is in again with me today. Just last night, because I don't know why my algorithm picked it up a day or two late, but I saw it. It was something from earlier this week. It was from an ESPN Plus article. So a shout out to my brother for helping me out. Usually Andrew's my hookup for these types of things, but, you know, like I said, I'm in for him right now. He's vacationing, and when he's vacationing, there's a lot of people that you have a better chance of getting in contact with than that man. So thanks to my brother for hooking me up with the ESPN Plus to get me set up here to look at this. Because I just see the graphic, and the graphic gave the way too early list of contenders. Who's contending for Super Bowl next season, and where the different tiers break out. All the different tiers, still major contenders. We've got the need a postseason breakthrough, which feels like a cop-out of a tier, but, you know, whatever. It's a tier nonetheless. And then I get to the third tier of teams. The teams 8 and 9 on this list. Listed as teetering contenders. Teetering contenders for next season. The way too early projection. The Cincinnati Bengals and your Philadelphia Eagles. And it's interesting when you look, again, I read a lot into the wording, of course, and I look at what they have to say, the blurb about the birds, and I'll read that for you in a second. But just the idea of teetering is where I want to start this, because we've done so much of the construction talk, so much of what went wrong talk, so much of, okay, here's the new coaching staff. How does it work? How will it play? What does it mean for the head coach? What does it mean for the quarterback? Look at that defense, how much they have to fix. But looking at the large picture, taking a step back and looking at the Eagles as an organization inside of the NFL and how they compare to their other companions, how they compare to the other teams that, you know, will go into next season believing they have a chance to contend, believing they have a chance to compete for a Super Bowl. It's interesting to see this tier broken out, and this is done by Jeremy Fowler again on ESPN. They're listed as a teetering contender, which brings me the question to all of you, and then for, of course, myself and Tom to answer, of which way are they teetering? We can list them as a teetering contender, but this seesaw isn't so even, okay? I want to see which way you think it tilts. Because for me, I look at this, and when they say teetering, I'm on the side of contending. I believe they're much closer to being the contender than falling to the tiers below them, which they certainly can't be on the head on the right track. We've already seen them on the right track. It's more of the where they fall into the mediocrity, the middle range. And I want to open up that conversation for you again at 610-632-0975 of whether you believe this is a group that is teetering closer to the contention or teetering closer to the middle. Because I see the argument that some of you will make, because I know some of you, have crawled back out after a little bit of a hibernation on the Jalen Hurts conversation, and you voiced your frustrations with it, and you're worried they paid a quarterback too soon. You're worried they paid the franchise guy that's not really the franchise guy. I know, and I'm one of you when it comes to the head coach, having the conversation about, well, I don't know if he should have been back. If it was up to me, he would not have been. But we got new coordinators. Well underway in the construction of changing this coaching staff and changing that over. And for some of you, that head coach will lean you to the point of, well, this isn't a guy that's going to do it again for you. And then you move it down the line and you keep with this team, the personnel surrounding the quarterback. And then certainly on the other side of the football, looking at the defense, the number of places that you have to replace, and you're sitting there thinking, I don't know about this. I don't know if really I could sit here and say that they are trending closer to competing than they're trending to be in the middle. And it's funny. I was thinking about this because I had seen this last night, and I'm thinking about getting into this conversation today. And I'm listening to the morning show, listening to the John Kincaid show, and on my drive-in, John posed this very exact question where he had seen someone just out and about and asked him about, hey, what do you think next year? Where do you think this team's going? And it is the way too early conversation. The way too early conversation is where this comes from, because obviously some of you sitting out there like, well, yeah, I mean, there hasn't been free agency. There has been the draft. We have all these holes. We have all these things they need to fix. We have an idea of what these coaches are, but how will they get into, this building? How will they mesh with this personnel, and how will they build out the personnel that they have to beyond this offseason and looking towards the future? And I totally understand why some of you would feel that way of, hey, wait, this is way too early. But this is kind of a conversation of faith and a conversation of belief in what they have, because ultimately your pillars are there. You have a quarterback that you have paid, that you have decided is your guy. They kept the head coach. They changed just about everything else, but they kept the head coach. And of course, it goes back to your general manager. It goes back to Howie Roseman. And it's a question of, can they dial it up? Can they turn it back up? Can they turn this thing back to where we believe they're a contender? Again, it's a lot when an organization has an 11-6 season and you're sitting there incredibly disappointed. But we saw the way it ended. We know how it ended. We know why if they played the way they did, or at least won the way they did early on, and found their way to a 14-3, to a 13-4, and maybe had fallen in the postseason early, and that was the disappointing part of it. It wasn't the disappointing just total collapse. Maybe they would be amongst the still major contenders, amongst the looking for that breakthrough type thing. And I think breakthrough category here as the Bills, Cowboys, and Dolphins. I think over the last couple of years, Eagles did something that those teams still have yet to do. So I don't even think they'd be a part of that tier. They'd probably still be in the major contenders. But you saw the way it ended. And I ask you if you think when they say teetering, this is teetering towards, the mediocrity, towards the middle of the league, or teetering towards being back in that higher ground, back in that rarefied air, back in the top 4 to 5 teams in football. Because on paper, through the beginning of this season, there were a lot of us that thought this was a team that was as talented as anyone else, that, hey, if they start playing their best football, who knows where this could go. We saw, who knows how it could go the other way at the end of the season. And yet, knowing everything I saw about the end of the season, knowing the question marks we still have about some of the pillars and about some of the things that are going into next season, I would still say this is a team much, much closer to contention, to being the true contender, to being the top-line contender, than falling into the middle. And that is a tough thing to reconcile after you would watch the team collapse the way it did in a way that no one else has. Nobody else has. In a 17-game season, it hasn't happened. It's only been a few years of 17-game seasons. Fine. There's one other team in the history of football, and it's a Jets team from the 80s. Okay, so you've gotten 2 examples of this. But as you look towards this offseason, the question becomes about your belief in the pillars of this organization to turn this around. Do you believe in Howie Roseman to spin it around one more time? Do you believe that he can, in the place where we're talking about contender next season? Do you believe that you can see the franchise quarterback, the guy that was the runner-up for MVP, the guy that if he didn't get hurt, a lot of us believe would be the MVP just 2 seasons ago, who outplayed Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl? Do you believe he can get them in a place where he dials it back up and where, after 11 games, he was a favorite for MVP, but we know how the season ended, and we know it wasn't as spectacular as it was the season before. And I know I've got my questions about the guy, but the head coach, when you look at Sirianni, do you believe that the brain trust that now surrounds him can lift this team into a new place? Or that maybe he looks in the mirror, realizes the mistakes of his ways, and he can be a part of the solution that pushes this forward? And that is the question here today that's simplified into this teetering contender. Because they are listed with the Bengals. amongst the teetering contenders crowd. Do you believe this team is teetering back towards contention? Have you been able to remove the stink of the last 2 months of the season, remove the emotion of what happened, and look at this team? Or maybe it's not even emotion that's pushing you this way. Have you seen enough from the end of that season to make you believe this is a team teetering back towards the middle, back towards mediocrity, and back towards somewhere, honestly, where you got to the end of the Peterson era, where, okay, they might make it to the postseason, but making it to the postseason's a real battle. And do they really have enough talent to go win themselves a Super Bowl at the end? Do they really have enough? Can you expect enough for them to go get that Super Bowl? I ask you that question at 610-632-0975. Do you believe this team is teetering closer towards contention or teetering close towards the middle of the pack in the NFL? We're going to get Tom's thoughts on that. Of course, take your phone calls on that again at 610-632-0975. And then I mentioned I was listening to the John Kincaid show on the way in today. Adam Schefter joins on Wednesdays. And, well, he said something that reminded me of something from a while back, from before the season, that Jason Kelsey had to say about this team. And it was funny to listen to it and think about it in the context of this teetering conversation. And I want to know why we continue to live this timeline and feel like we live in this cycle about the Birds, and get your thoughts on that at 610-632-0975. I'm Ray Dunn. I'll be taking you up until 2 o'clock, in for the midday show, in for Andrew Salchunas, right here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
Crucial Eagles offseason. I'm Tom Alvord, and this update is brought to you by Dell Technologies. This year, Dell Technologies wants to help you do amazing things with their best tech, like the XPS 13 Plus, powered by Intel Core processors. Amazing prices await at Dell.com/deals.
welcome back into the Midday Show here on 97.5 The Fanatic. I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchunas. Tom Alvord hanging out with us as well. Our 10 o'clock hour brought to you by Window Nation. Take advantage of Window Nation's 50% off sale on all style windows. Plus, make no down payment with no payments and no interest for 12 full months. Call 866-90Nation or visit windownation.com. A lot to get into today. A pair of guests from the Philadelphia Inquirer, Gina Mizell, as well as Matt Breen, joining the show as we get going through this one. Mizell joins us at 11:30. Breen at 12:30, of course, for our Breen Day here. Appreciate him keeping it, Andrew not in. We still want to get our Breen Day. So we're excited to have both of them on coming up later on in the show. And we got plenty to get into, looking at some things that were said about the Birds nationally yesterday that I want to react to at some point here. Bryce Harper and the extension talks. I know a lot of people fired up about that, and of course, getting into some of the drama, because I can't wait to talk a little bit about the drama at the NBA. I love it. There's a little bit of me giving away some content for that. I love it. I'm gonna ask the question, but I absolutely love it. But something that I'm curious how you feel towards, because I saw it yesterday, and it's a story from earlier this week on ESPN, on ESPN Plus. Jeremy Fowler putting all 32 teams in the NFL into tiers in terms of contention. And the Eagles fall into the third tier. They fall into the tier of teetering contenders. And when we're talking about teetering, I don't think anyone really thinks that the seesaw is just kind of flat. You're either in the belief of, and this doesn't have to be, you've got the green goggles on, you think they're going back to the Super Bowl, it's a lock, bet on it, or you think next year they're picking first overall. It's a slight feel. And I'm asking for the slight gut feel here at 610-632-0975, because it is way too early. The premise of the article is way too early. The premise of the conversation is way too early. But it becomes a question about what you believe and your belief in just about all the pillars of this organization to do something for you to turn this another way. So I'm asking you again, if you believe the teetering is closer towards a contender or closer towards that of the middle of the pack, that mediocrity, that center of the National Football League. Because for me, I look at, and I laid it out for you, I have faith in, one, their quarterback to turn it back to what we've seen. And that's just, he's given reason for doubters to be worried when you doubt him too much in the past. And also, I look at what they've done as a front office, and it's funny because Adam Schefter was on with the John Kincaid show today, and there's a couple of things I want to play throughout the show today of that conversation with him. But he got this similar question because the morning show got into this question. And it reminded me of Jason Kelsey, and back, I think it was a New Heights podcast episode where they were talking about, hey, when Eagles fans expect us to be great, well, we actually are not that great. When they expect us to be bad, we figure out a way to be good. It's interesting now with the expectations going in this offseason, the tense nature around this team, the way a lot of people feel about this group, that Adam Schefter talked with the John Kincaid show today and had this to say about the Eagles and whether they're headed up or down.
I like these spots where nobody's expecting much. This is where, a couple of seasons ago, I picked them to have a big season, if you remember, right? I like going against the grain. When people are, down on a team, I think they're right to make a comeback, particularly in a division where there hasn't been a repeat champion in, 19, 20 years. So if that holds up, if history holds up, then Dallas isn't going to win. You like Philly, you like Washington, you like the Giants to win the division next year. You tell me.
I'll tell you one thing. The other two listed, I'll pass on the Commanders, and I'll pass on the team that invested in Daniel Jones. So, well, in that case, Adam, make a nice point for the division next year and for the Birds next year. But I'm curious because it is a weird thing. I want to get into the conversation a little bit about what keeps the sustained success. This was the team that was supposed to get back. First NFC team to lose Super Bowl, get back. Since, what was it, the 70s was the stat there with the Vikings back then. And then in terms of the division, Schefter just laid it out, where it's been years since you've seen a repeat NFC East champion. So I'm curious for you about this teetering contenders conversation at 610-632-0975. if you had to feel right now, before you get into free agency, before we even get to the combine, before we get to the draft, as we get moving through this offseason, and you've now had a chance to digest the end of that season, and I keep saying it, I'm starting to compartmentalize it. I'm not going to get over it, but I'm starting to just push it away and avoid it as much as I can to start looking towards the future. What does the future hold? Do you think it's a team teetering closer to that contention or teetering closer to that middle ground? And again, I think it really comes back to the faith you have in the pillars of this organization. Tom Albert, hello.
Ray Dunn, hey.
How are you?
Good, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So
Good.
I want to ask you this, as we ask the audience this. When we talk about teetering, I don't think it's an even thing here. I don't think it's just they're sitting there and you're waiting for the seesaw to go one way or another. I think we all have a slight feeling one way or another on the way it is teetering. Which way do you see it going? Is this a team closer towards that of contention, or do you see this as one closer to that of going to the middle ground?
So this conversation can change every single day, every single week as things start to happen, as the offseason starts to go along in the NFL. Right now, on February 21st, based on what I've seen most recently, what have you done for me lately, the Philadelphia Eagles, I have seen a team that lost 6 of their last 7 games, including getting blown out by Baker Mayfield in a playoff game. And I also haven't seen much happen yet because, again, it is very early on in the offseason. These things can change. So based on what I've seen recently, based on the little bit that has happened, you've hired some new coaches, which I'm very excited about, and it's going to be interesting to see how they do here in Philadelphia this upcoming year. It's a lot of just projection if you're going to say that they're teetering more towards a contender. So right now, on this day, the 21st of February, I have to say that they're teetering more towards the middle of the pack because, yes, I can project that Jalen Hurts is going to bounce back. I can project that Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio are going to be better. I can project that Howie Roseman is going to extend Hassan Reddick, Devontae Smith, and Landon Dickerson. I can project that they are going to completely change up this defense. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. I have to see it first. So right now, based on what I've seen, I have to say they're teetering towards the middle of the pack. Like, I can't get last year out of my head. And yes, I think that new coaches, key word there, new coaches in Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio are going to help this team big time, going to put this team in a very good spot to succeed. I also still believe that this team has a top 10 quarterback in all of football. I think he regressed a little bit last year. I think a lot of it was because of coaching. I think a little bit of it was because of some flukiness that is the NFL when it comes to the turnovers. So the pillars are good, but we're doing a lot of projecting here. So until I see this happen, I have to say they're teetering more towards the middle of the pack. That doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't mean they're going to be under 500. It doesn't mean they're going to be a top 5 pick. It just means they're going to be around maybe a 9-win team, 10-win team that doesn't really have a true chance of winning a Super Bowl. This can all change 4 weeks into the season. They're 4-0. Kellen Moore looks like an absolute whiz, and you have some pieces on defense. But right now, it's too much projection for me to say that they are a contender, a Super Bowl contender right now.
Now, would you say you're not projecting in the other way? Based off of the end of the season.
It's based on what I've seen factually, though.
Well, factually, you don't know what's going to happen. When I say they're projected towards contenders, I don't know what's going to happen. But when you also don't know what's going to happen this offseason. So
sure.
So I think it's a projection based on what you saw at the end.
Yeah, but more so, there hasn't really been any answer. Like, there's so many question marks. I guess I'm projecting a little bit, but there's so many question marks that has to be filled on this team that haven't been answered yet. Now, they very well could answer them, but there is a ton to make up. I don't think this is just an easy fix where, hey, you finished with 11 wins. It was a good season. We just have to insert a piece here or there, re-sign this guy here or there. Man, there's a ton of questions on that defensive side of the ball. I know you and Chunas have gone through it. How many starters they might have to replace, especially if Cox and Kelsey are to retire. So, yeah, maybe I'm projecting a little bit. I look at it as there's so many questions. Look at how bad last season ended, and there's question marks about your head coach who was retained here. So, yeah, maybe I'm projecting a little bit, but I don't think unfairly so.
Okay. So when you say that, and you, again, I think this is part of the conversation, and I have another question off this, and we will get to the phone at 610-632-0975 about everything they have to do, everything that the Philadelphia Eagles have to do this offseason. It's interesting because I know a lot of us are, how are they going to spend money here? How are they going to spend money there? You know, they got to do this, that, the other, 100%, 1,000%. And I think this is a very Philadelphia mindset for us because we're fixated on our team. You know, do I care necessarily? I will care what, the Bills do with salary cap money, like who they spend it on because I'm an NFL fan.
Stephon Diggs still going to be there.
Did you see the Gabe Davis stuff?
Yeah, where he's posting his like advanced stats.
Yeah, man.
Yes.
All of a sudden, we're calculator nerds when we point that stuff out. Gabe Davis is just a smart negotiator when he points that stuff out. And I give him props. The end of my thank you video to the city that I played in, just being like 4 slides in a row of how good I was and like, kind of a shame you're not going to have me anymore. It's like, thanks, but here's what you're going to lose. It's a nice way to go out. I actually respect a lot out of the way he goes. I think every thank you video should end with that. I think teams, when they do the thank you video when the player comes back to town, the end of the video should not be the thank you graphic. It should instead be a very cherry-picked list of stats that make them seem like the best player ever in that organization.
Their first down catch percentage.
Yes. Like, I just think it should be every little thing. Like, when who's going to come back through all this? Marcus Morris. Like, we should have 3-pointers made and then a little asterisk by a Sixer in the fourth quarter of X game. And it's like first in NBA.
His per 48 minutes or something
right,
like
yeah.
that.
Like, I think we should just cherry pick stats to make everyone look like the best player that's ever played. I like Gabe Davis as wide receiver. I got a little carried away there with that one. But seriously, I think it was good stuff. But I mean, when we look at the Bills, we look at other teams, we look at around football about what they're doing. I think sometimes we get lost in it because it's like, oh yeah, they're doing that. They're going to figure that out. We have seen this team figure it out before. And of the 9 teams that are in this top 3 tiers of contenders, because the Eagles are the third of that tier, the teetering conversation where they go back and forth. The Eagles are just one of 4 of those 9 teams that actually right now, when they go into the offseason, they are under the cap. They have cap space. Of those 9 teams, 5 of the 9 of them are going to have to create cap space. They are in the negative when it comes to cap space. The Dolphins are close to negative 60. When you talk about the Cowboys, negative 26, and this is $1 million. Bills, minus $50.5 million. Like, when we look at the cap, and again, you can manipulate it. We've seen that. We know that better than any other town. There are decisions that other teams have to make that are just as difficult that we are already penciling in as contenders next year. Do you think the 49ers are going to be contenders again next year?
I would say probably yes.
Yeah, okay. They're $44 million over. So there's work for them to do. 85% of their team cap is taken up by 10 veteran players. They're going to have to build out a roster of 53 with 15% of their cap. Or a lot of restructures. And, oh, by the way, one of those players is not Brandon Ayuk. And I know he has already made it pretty clear he's not too happy. So we get so caught up in our own world for good reason. It's our team of what we need to do. But when I look at the idea of contention, part of this goes to the rest of the league. And the rest of the league is going to have to make similar difficult decisions that we're sitting here having. Do you think the Eagles, who have, as much as we can be frustrated with the way everything slid after the Super Bowl victory, and now the way things seem to be sliding after appearing in the Super Bowl last year, do you have faith that this organization can outmaneuver many of these other ones that have similar struggles coming up this offseason with what they have to do with their rosters?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes down to what do you define as a true contender? Like, how many true contenders are there right now in football? I think you have to look at the last 4 teams that were involved this season, 49ers, Chiefs, and, of course, Detroit and Baltimore, because they got there. They proved it. It's easy to say that a team like the Bills are a contender, and I love the Bills. I think Josh Allen gets a little bit too much hate. He gets too much hate. I'll just say that. They haven't gotten to the conference championship yet under Josh Allen. You look at a team like Miami. Yeah, could they be contenders? Absolutely. This is a team that hasn't won a playoff game with Tua. You look at the Jets. Could they be contenders with Aaron Rodgers? Sure, but they haven't won a game with Aaron Rodgers completing a game as the quarterback. You look at the Cowboys, a team that chokes every year. And then you go to the Eagles, where I think they lean. Again, it goes back to what you define a contender as. But yes, the Eagles have been there. The Eagles have good pillars. But at the same time, look at how bad it ended last year. And did your quarterback maybe get exposed a little bit? And did Sirianni, your head coach, maybe get exposed a little bit this past season? So I think it goes down to what do you truly define as a contender? Right now, to me, the only true contenders are the 4 teams that were in the conference championships last year, because the NFL is such a week-to-week and year-to-year league.
It's funny you say that, because the top tier, according to this article, would be the Ravens, the Lions, the Chiefs, and the 49ers. So you and Jeremy Fowler have a little bit in common in that one.
And oh, by the way, that doesn't mean those teams don't have their problems as well. You mentioned the cap space issues that the 49ers may have. We saw what a Super Bowl hangover can do here in Philadelphia. Let's say that doesn't happen to the 49ers, who, in my opinion, probably have less talent at the quarterback than the Eagles do. The Kansas City Chiefs, they're set to lose their top corner and Chris Jones, their top D tackle. Like, all of these teams have issues. It's such a week-to-week league and so much changes in the NFL. There's so much parity. To me, I have to lean more towards Fowler, where I really only see 4 true contenders for a Super Bowl at this point, late February.
And that's understood. I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from in that regard. But then if those are your 4 true contenders, when we get to the teetering conversation, you did say that they were headed closer to the middle of the pack. That's fine. You believe the Eagles are moving closer to that middle grouping versus that top 4. Because I guess for you, the rest, the Bills, Cowboys, Dolphins, Bengals leading down to the Eagles in this conversation, I think there's good reason to believe that any one of those 5 that aren't amongst those top 4, this top 9 grouping that I'm mentioning, could be sliding towards the middle. I look at this and I say, of all these teams, the Eagles actually have cap space where others, they're going to have to do a lot more maneuvering against the cap. I think the Bills are in quite a situation where they could fall off. And again, that's the AFC, so it doesn't necessarily mean anything. But the Cowboys are going to have to pay Dak. CeeDee Lamb is going to be due for a new contract. Micah Parsons is going to want to get paid at some point. Their offensive line, when we talk about what's going to happen with this offensive line, their offensive line is starting to get a little bit older. And oh, by the way, they're going to have to fill some holes, whether it be linebacker, running back. So there's things that they have to address as well, where I look at this group, I like the quarterback. The quarterback's already gotten his contract. If I were to go in a fantasy draft and end up, one of those, you fire up Madden, and you were handed the Eagles' offensive roster, you would expect, well, there's something you could do with this. This is a group that you could do something with. And I obviously expect them to be very, very aggressive in fixing up that defense. And I look back at the 2021 defense to the 2022 defense. They found ways to turn it around. They found ways to maneuver this league before that has taken a defense that was, in that year, average at best. And, they were able to get it back to, and I don't expect a 2022 defense in 2024. But I'm not asking them to be, third or wherever it was in that season in terms of scoring defense. I'm asking them not to be 30th. I'm asking them to be somewhere in the midst of the middle of the pack.
And I think a lot of what you're thinking on this is you've seen the Eagles fix these things before and fix them quickly. And I see that as well. And I think a lot of Eagles fans out there are right to have that opinion. Like, look, this has been a team since 2000, I believe, has the second most wins in all of football. This has been a team that has gone back to the Super Bowl with 2 different head coaches and 2 different quarterbacks in, 5-6 seasons? Like, I understand that under Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, this thing has been pretty good. So you're going to trust them to make it better. And I do a little bit as well. I absolutely do. However, I think, again, things ended so poorly last year. And you still have so many question marks when it comes to personnel and now head coach. Like, if I didn't have as many question marks about the head coach, I think I'd probably be in a better spot. And who knows? Maybe Sirianni was just a blip on the radar, and he's going to be the head coach he was 2 years ago going forward for the Eagles. He's going to be here for 10 years. I think that's what Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie expect to happen, and maybe myself a little bit as well. However, I just saw things that I can't unsee. It sounds like a horror movie. I saw things I can't unsee with the Philadelphia Eagles, and they're going to have to prove a lot to me for me to buy back in.
You having nightmares?
Little bit, man.
You waking up you getting sleep these days?
Listen, man.
I know.
Got blown out by Baker Mayfield. Come on now, man.
But I think at that point, yeah, and maybe the reason that game doesn't stick with me the way it does with you is by that game I had really resigned myself to the fact that it was over.
Oh, I picked him to lose by double digits. It still happened. I still couldn't believe I saw it, even though I picked it.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that might be it. The disbelief, I was no longer suspended in disbelief by that point. After I watched the second half against Cowboys game was what started the downfall for me. And then the Seahawks, I hated them playing in Seattle, so I was already distraught over that. Patricia, I can't relive this. This is every time I say I'm trying to compartmentalize and move on, I start reliving it. We can't let me relive this, okay?
Cardinals game did it for me.
Yeah, well, Happy New Year on that one. That was a fun New Year.
Jonathan Gannon pants you, and you're on whatever.
Yeah, it's fine. Again, we're moving past it, all right? We got to move to next season. And the question is, if they're a teetering contender, which way is this teetering going? Are they teetering? Would you say they're teetering closer to being the contender, teetering closer to being in that mediocre range of the NFL? And a question I have for you, because a lot of this for some people feels like a little bit of Groundhog's Day. You think about winning the Super Bowl the next year. The next year they actually got further in the postseason than they did the year following the Super Bowl loss. But then you start moving down into that range. Okay, winning 9 games, then finally the Doug Peterson era ends. What do you think it is that keeps this group from its sustained success, from remaining at the top? And to be fair, you look at the teams that are listed at the top of this contenders list. There's some of them that have been able to sustain. 49ers been able to keep themselves up there competing in the NFL, though last time they went to a Super Bowl the year after was maybe not the prettiest for them. So maybe something to root for, to look forward to next season. Who's to say? Or, there's the teams like the Lions have made that jump up to that next category. But what do you think has kept this team from sustained success? Or is it just a byproduct of the NFL? I'm curious about that as well as we continue on here at 610-632-0975. I also want to get into this. At 11 o'clock, we used to do a segment on this program that was very audio-focused. And it used to take you back in time. I'm only going to take you back the last 24 hours because I loved just about every bit of it. And I want to relive it with you in the NBA. And I have a question off of that about the NBA, its theatrics, and really how you feel about that. So we'll get your input on that as well at 610-632-0975. I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchinos here on the Midday Show here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
Getting closer to Phillies baseball.
continue on here, getting into some Eagles talk early as we looked at the idea of them being teetering contenders. What does that mean they're teetering towards? Towards true contention or towards mediocrity? And, you could sit there and say, well, yeah, they're teetering. Well, yeah, if you accept it at face value, or you can actually sit here and have a thought of where you believe this team is going. And so far, Tom and I, opposite sides of this one. Tom sees them teetering towards the middle of the pack in the NFL, and I see the fact that I know what they have. I believe in the fact that they could build this back, and I would say they're probably teetering closer to the competitive and the contender status that we all want them to get back to. And I think that's where I would go with that conversation. I'm curious how you feel at 610-632-0975. Coming up later in this segment, we got plenty of audio for you. In what was a fun day in the NBA, and this is, again, a question I'm going to pose to you off of it, that I'm excited to just relive kind of the chaos that came from yesterday, all the conversation, all of the dialogue surrounding a former 76er head coach that then just turned into, I don't know, a lot of yelling. And speaking of the NBA, Gina Mizell going to join the program coming at 11:30 of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Covers the Sixers for the Inquirer. Going to talk about, one, the experience being out there in Indy, a little bit about what happened at the All-Star game. And then following that, of course, what to expect as we get ready to get the Sixers back in action. They're back in action tomorrow night. Tonight on the station, you'll be able to hear the Flyers' first game coming back since that stadium series where Tom Alvord was able to go up and enjoy himself the evening up there at MetLife, even if, maybe the result wasn't what he was looking for. He at least had to have a good time up there, right? Yeah. You had a good time up there at the stadium series?
Yeah, dude, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, result not so much fun, but very cool experience. Glad I got to do it.
That's good. I'm glad. You sign off on the future outdoor games?
Yeah, it's, a little bit tougher to see rather than just a regular hockey game. And it wasn't warm, I'll say that much. It wasn't clear water weather or anything like that.
Not Daytona?
Not Daytona.
Not Daytona?
No, I would do it again. If they did it every single year, I wouldn't be rushing to do it every single year, but I would absolutely do it again, yes.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, it's worth doing. I recommend it.
Glad. Yeah, well, problem is you can't really have Daytona weather and also have a hockey game. So that's...
Yeah, that'd be problematic.
Yeah, that'd be problematic. I would be interested in seeing it, though. Not necessarily for it being a game that counted, but if they wanted to try, I'd be interested in seeing how it worked.
Yeah, just like playing on a swimming pool or something, potentially. But, yeah, good luck with that.
Pool hockey?
Yeah, sure.
I think I'm just talking about water polo at this point.
A little different, but sure. Yeah, absolutely.
No sticks, a ball. Not at all the same, but sure.
Very different.
Very different. All right. I want to get back to this Eagles conversation before we get into this day in the NBA yesterday. And we're going to get that to you in the next couple of minutes. I said it's kind of like an old segment we had on this show that used to come up around 11 o'clock playing some audio. And we'll get into that. But first, I want to go to the phones at 610-632-0975. Go to Huntington Valley. Talk with Heavy. Heavy, you're on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Yeah, bro, what's good?
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'll start off positively regarding the Eagles. I do think out of the NFC East, I do think they have the best chance of winning the NFC East just because, obviously, Washington sucks, the Giants suck, and honestly, I think the Cowboys are going to be without their head coach after maybe 5-6 weeks, if not earlier.
So your thought is looking around the rest of the NFC East saying they could be in a good position because of circumstances around them.
Exactly. I do think the Eagles have the strongest chance of coming out of the NFC East as the winners. But I do think, compared to the rest of the league, I do think, we all watched that Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And I think we all know it's going to take a lot to get this defense anywhere near half as good as what the defenses were in the Super Bowl. And despite that, I do think that if the offense makes certain changes and plays a certain way, like they should have last season, that can alleviate the struggles of the defense. And I do think Fangio will help the defense be better. But you're talking about replacing...
So, Heavy, I see where you're going with this. I understand where you're going with this. And I think you're going somewhere along thought process that I have with the offense of how good this offense is. You look at the 2 Super Bowls they've played in what, now the last 7 years, the last 7 Super Bowls, it's only been getting one stop. It's only about making that one stop ultimately in those games because they've played in 2 of the highest scoring Super Bowls we've ever seen. So I would tend to agree with you that if you coach them up a little bit better, you get the talent a little bit better, that, yeah, they could be right back in the situation given the fact that you have to have the coaching on the other side of the football and the execution on the other side of the football that we expected going into this season that we didn't get. Now, quickly, I know you got something on the All-Star game.
I just forget the All-Star game.
Forget the All-Star game. Well, Heavy, it's good talk to you.
I just want to say, I mean, we all know what happened last year. I mean, we saw.
Yeah.
We saw this team, and it refused to make any changes. And
well,
I think
now you got some changes. You got some changes, Heavy, and I appreciate the phone call. He just no interest in the All-Star game anymore. Thought about it. No, I don't want to talk about it anymore.
That's how bad it was for him.
That's how bad it was for him. How bad it was for people to watch. Again, I know Tom was not. Tom doesn't make an appointment viewing, which I understood on that one. I don't know if it is appointment viewing anymore, but I like seeing them have fun, hang out. We did that conversation already. His conversation about the Birds there, that's, again, I think part of why I think they are closer to contender when we start talking about the teetering. I look at the talent on one side of the football that has really the potential with that group to be an elite level producing group on the field. And they've already got that in the building where I've seen them in the past. Like if they can ride that to where they want to go, it's why we believe they were going to be good enough this year. Because I don't think I went into the belief of last season. I remember doing a show in the offseason where I was like, yeah, this defense is, it was one of the top in football last year. It's not going to be one of the top 10 this year, just looking at everything you've had to replace, the fact you've got a new coordinator. And, people, I remember getting some pushback like, how dare you? Like, this defense will be amongst the best. And, I didn't think it was going to be as bad as it was, quite clearly. But if this defense had been even just average and this offense had produced to the level that then start going down a lot of what ifs there. But I think that's part of what you solve with coaching, part of what you solve, again, with bringing in some actual talent to the back end of that defense where it was just neglected last season. And Howie Roseman made the point when they had the end of season pressers, like, we were focused on having an elite offense. Well, now you can't just focus on the offense this offseason. That can't just be the lock-in. This is what you've got offensively. Now, defensively, you have to supplement it. You have to.
Yeah, I think it comes down to what do you have more faith in? What do you believe is more real? The way that the Eagles have been able to rebuild and continue to be a contender the last decade, or pretty much as long as Jeffrey Lurie has been there, been able to fix their mistakes, correct their problems and flaws that they've had? Or do you lean more into, hey, last year was a historic collapse, not just a collapse, a historic collapse where you were 10-1 with this type of talent on offense and some talent on defense. They were not put in good positions. And no, a lot of those guys did not play very well, but you had a very talented team, a team that had Super Bowl aspirations all season long that completely fell apart, not just on the field, but off. You started hearing rumblings. You have Brandon Graham saying that the media got Sean Desai demoted. Everything going different directions. What do you believe is more real? What do you put more faith into? Is it the former, where it's the Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie? They know what they're doing. This is a great organization that has fixed problems before. Or was last year that bad that you just can't get it out of your head and you need to be proven that was wrong, like myself?
Yeah, I guess, and I know that like the Discord, and we're gonna get into what just talking heads, talking birds that yesterday made waves, and I know just conversation today, and I'm very excited to air for you to replay that pushback it got today on the air because score one for Shefty this morning. But I think like the Discord of the problems inside of that locker room, like. You're going to go now into an offseason where you're not around one another, where there's going to be pieces of this puzzle that are, shifted and, frankly, taken out, that are gone. Like, I understand problems year to year can occur. I'm not as big a subscriber as, like, just because it looked like it all fell apart at the end of this season, that means the next season's doomed, and basically until you rid the locker room of everyone that was a part of it, we're going down that hill. Which
I usually tend to agree with. And I'm not saying that you're going to be wrong. I actually think you're probably going to be right. I think this is going to be a good season for the Philadelphia Eagles. I just have to see it. Is there any concern for you the head coach that was here with this historic collapse has been brought him back, and we now realize what kind of flaws he has, and there's a lot of these same players coming back. Do they start to question the head coach and, like me, not forget what happened last season, the first sign of adversity? Is there any worry with that when it comes to you?
Well, there's worry with the head coach. Listen to the head coach. I'm not worried about them with the coordinators at first. Problem. What power Nick Sirianni has left over this group, that's a major question mark for me. The rest of the coaching, I'm more in the wait-and-see mode. I like what they did with the coordinators overall. And, there's just been way too big of a coaching staff overhaul. Like, I'm incredibly intrigued to see what exactly Sirianni is to this group come next year, because just about all of his coaches, not all of them, but a good number of them were shown the door. And a lot of these replacements, I can't tell you that I have the faith that it was Sirianni directing on the hiring of these guys. So I know he wanted Fangio. But other than that, looking down the line, very interested to see that type of, offensive coordinator is the leader of the offense. Defensive coordinator is the leader of the defense. And Nick Sirianni, well, he'll make sure he's got the T-shirts of his guys to show you he supports them. All right. So I'm curious for you at 610-632-0975. ESPN article by Jeremy Fowler called the Eagles teetering contenders. Which way do you see them teetering? Towards actually being a contender or towards that middle of the pack in the NFL? Now, I want to take this to an NBA topic. And I want to pose this question for you because it's been called the greatest reality TV show. It's the off-season sometimes for people gets you more fired up than the regular season when it comes to the NBA. There's people that live for the drama. And there's also a subset of, I think, our audience and fans of basketball who just hate every bit of the dramatics. I want to let you know, I'm one for the theater. I'm all for it. I think it's fantastic. But I'm curious for you out there at 610-632-0975 if it bothers you. And I'm asking you this because yesterday is a perfect example of just how great the theater of the NBA is. It didn't have to take a star player asking out. It really didn't have to take much at all. I want to run you through a timeline of really, I'll say the last 24 hours, but it's a little extended back of this because it all starts with the Doc Rivers media tour, which, by the way, if you are a Bucs PR person that has decided today, you know what, I want to listen to radio in Philadelphia, I commend you. Thank you. We appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you tune in for a considerable amount of time. If you've, got anyone that's Nielsen, got a beater, hey, listen, give us the help there. But if you're a Milwaukee PR person, go, thank you. I appreciate you checking in, tapping in. I've got advice for you. Stop the podcast tour for Doc Rivers. Please. I'm begging you. Please stop it. It is horrible for you. It's awesome for me. So let's start with Doc Rivers. And, this one went viral yesterday, and he was on SiriusXM NBA radio talking about, the decision by the Bucs to bring him in.
Personally, I'll be honest. I told our owners when they called, I said, I think I don't understand why you're doing this, And they said, one of the things they said was, well, it doesn't matter. We've done it now, and we want you. And so that was a tough one. That's where you had the hesitation.
So again, he's talking about, I guess, more the decision of Adrian Griffin and the moving on from him. And they already did it, and they're like, we want you, Doc Rivers. Because remember, Rivers was an advisor, or was at least helping advise the guy who got fired. And nothing better than bringing in the guy advising the guy who got fired to be the role that you just fired the guy for. But Doc Rivers, who has told you that he doesn't understand why they did it, that he hoped for the ability to wait until after the All-Star break to become the coach, that he also thinks this is the greatest challenge that anyone's ever been given in the history of humankind, now goes again and drops that nugget on NBA radio. J.J. Redick goes on First Take. His first day back on the job, I believe, at First Take this NBA season. And then has this to say about his former head coach.
I've seen the trend now. I've seen the trend for years.
What's the trend?
The trend is always making excuses. Doc, we get it. Taking over a team in the middle of the season is hard. It's hard. We get it. Just like getting traded in the middle of the season is hard for a player. We get it. But it's always an excuse. It's always throwing your team under the bus. They lose to Memphis. Oh, it's his players' fault. Memphis was playing G League guys and two-way guys. And then you look at his quotes over the weekend. Now he wants to take credit for the James Harden trade to the Clippers working out. He wants credit for that. There's never accountability with that guy.
Well,
there's never accountability.
Which also, Doc Rivers' media tour included taking credit for the James Harden deal, which was wild. Just a wild thing for him to saying, I was one of the guys who said it would be a great deal for them. I thought he fit them better than he would fit the Sixers team. I think he's a perfect fit there. So glad that after the way their whole relationship here in Philadelphia ended, Doc Rivers was like, that's your guy. Go get him. But hey, listen, thank you, Doc, for that one. I appreciate that one, helping out. But then after J.J. Redick says that, it's a battle of the podcasts because Pat Bev tweets out, this man, Doc, actually saved your career, talking about J.J., starred you when no one else wanted to, and you retire, go on TV and say that. So now it becomes the battle about J.J. Redick. So remember, this all started, we were talking about Doc Rivers and the Bucks. This has now become Pat Bev taking a shot at J.J. Redick. All of these former Sixers, by the way. Pat, my guy, I had a 4-year offer with player option for the same money to be a starter for a different team. FOH, which I'm going to say, if you don't know what it means, it's not nice.
Get out of here.
Yeah. Saved my career. And he says that in quotes because he obviously doesn't believe. And yeah, let's be clear. Doc Rivers did not save JJ's career. Pat Bev is playing for Doc Rivers now in Milwaukee and is having his guys back. Pat Bev then saying, why didn't you take it then? You were comfy in your role with team and just don't say LA. So, the two of them have their back and forth, but that's not enough because now JJ Redick and Pat Bev are having a problem. Who else is employed by ESPN? Who else has a platform to talk? Well, if you didn't enjoy the J.J. Redick commentary on Doc Rivers in the morning on ESPN, in the afternoon, you got Austin Rivers, who had something to say.
First off, I don't feel responsible to take up for my dad. He's a grown man. He could do his own thing. But in this regard, I just simply don't agree with it. For someone who's not accountable, he seems to always be held responsible, considering he's the guy that's always fired when things don't go right. He got fired in the bubble for a 3-1 lead versus the Denver Nuggets, which in half his team didn't want to be there. They had players saying that their mind wasn't there. He had guys leave. That happened. Then he gets fired for losing to a team that was favored over him, which was the Celtics last year. Seems like he's always responsible. It's just as strange coming from JJ. And I have some love for JJ. You're my dookie. You know that. You're my bro. I love you. It's just your best years were with the Clippers. I don't think he saved your career. I appreciate you, Pat. But this just seems a little bit weird. They're 3-7. Dame has missed most of those games. Middleton's missed a lot of those games. They haven't even had their full team yet. We'll see what happens. The pressure is there. They do have to perform. But in terms of accountability, like, what are we doing here? Your best years in the NBA were when you played for him in the Clippers. I don't know if there's like frustration there or there's tension there between you. I know a lot of times we had to sit you towards the end of the game due to defensive reasons.
Austin Rivers playing the whole, you weren't a guy that would be able to close the game. Austin Rivers playing that card for you. But okay. So that's Austin Rivers having that conversation. You got a couple of guys, including former 76er Spencer Hawes, checking in on this. We want to talk about someone whose career got saved by Doc, and, you know, he's alluding to the fact that he thinks Austin Rivers might have been saved by Doc. And, of course, Austin Rivers then saying again that the best years of his career were in L.A., that the best years of J.J. Redick's career were in L.A., and I would argue that one to a considerable level, that if you look at the numbers across the board, I think his numbers probably similar to the end of his Orlando time, and I know everyone talked about his role alongside Embiid in Philadelphia and what that did for his career. But okay, all that aside, the theater there is tremendous. We have no games going on. This is the All-Star break, and we are able to have a timeline that starts out with Doc Rivers questioning why they fired the coach and then gave him the job, that ends with Spencer Hawes tweeting about nepotism in the NBA.
Sixers legend.
This is the greatest theater out there. The NBA provides better content than almost any show scripted, unscripted, reality, whatever you want on television. I understand football is king in this country, and I love baseball as much as anyone. There is nothing like the NBA. I love it. Tom, does this stuff, like, do you engage with it? Do you enjoy it? Does it bother you?
It doesn't bother me. No, I could see how people get bothered by it. To me, I enjoy it. I'm not actively looking for it, or like if Austin Rivers is set to speak in an hour on First Take, it's not must-watch television for me. Like, I really don't care. I see the clips that go all over social media, and I find them funny. Doesn't bother me, but I'm not out searching for it, but it is pretty damn funny.
It's pretty awesome. This is one of the best things going. This association is one of the best things going. I'm curious, though, for people, because I know there are people, basketball, focus on the game. Give me that. Why do we have to talk about this, that? Focus on the game. Does it bother you that it's this theatrical? I'm curious for you out there at 610-632-0975 if this type of news cycle bothers you. And also, on top of that, something to open up for you. And, Tom, I'm going to give my answer. I will take yours on the other side as well. We went through that. Pause, former Sixer. Pat Bev, obviously, we know, former Sixer. J.J. Redick, Doc Rivers. It's fun because I love the fact that we can refer to them all as former Sixers. But the way that we've all reacted to Doc, and this media tour is on, I've seen everyone aligned in a way that I am not used to. And I'm curious for it. The last decade, it's been 10 years now since this organization decided on a path forward. Okay? I'm going to use that phrasing. It's been over a decade now since that 2013 NBA draft. I'm curious. Who's the biggest villain for you? Who's the one that's the, someone who used to sit in this seat would say a lot, that hate the face? The one that bothers you the most. The biggest villain for you of the last decade. At 610-632-0975. Because I'm curious for you and who exactly that answer would be, because I see a lot of people lying against Doc. I think there's a number of great answers here, and I'd love to.
Has to be Sixers, right? Sixers.
Yeah, Sixers related. Just because we're talking a lot of former Sixers, and I see everyone aligned against Doc Rivers. I'm curious for it. We're going to take a break. We come back. We'll get into that. We'll have Gina Mizell join the show from the Philadelphia Inquirer at 11:30 to talk all things Sixers. I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchunas here on the Midday Show on 97.5 The Fanatic. Hi, I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchunas here on the Midday Show here on 97.5 The Fanatic. Tom Alvord with me. Our 11 o'clock hour here is brought to you by Golden Nugget Jewelers, where Philly gets engaged. And well, we spent the end of that last segment talking about just the theater, the drama, just loving every bit of it's the All-Star break, which isn't exactly like, middle of August, like late NBA, early September storylines where it's like, luckily at that point we have football take over and, we don't get we don't have to miss all the same things. But the NBA has come close, is the closest of all of the leagues to rivaling the 365 of the NFL. Right now, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say that one because you think about the regular season, and part of what carries this season is the drama and the talking points that come from the drama. This had nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with a star player asking out. Doc Rivers is already the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. It has been for a couple weeks now. But it became something because he has been on a media tour, and that helps when you're the Eastern Conference All-Star coach for, reasons because the Celtics couldn't do it again this year. So it had to be who was second at a certain date. And at that point,
Whether you like it or not.
The Bucks were second because of the work Adrian Griffin had put in. And they've now fallen to third because of, rough stretch. That's not Doc Rivers' fault. Doc Rivers wants you to know it's not his fault. Okay? More than anything else, it is the most difficult task someone has ever been asked to accomplish. Taking over a 30-13 basketball team midway through the season. I'd like to see what every player in the NBA thought when he's like, wow, going to a team mid-season? That's what the trade deadline sounds like to me. That must be real difficult for you, being added to a contender and just supposed to gel a new city. But whatever. Anyway, so with that, there were so many former Sixers thrown in there, and I have not seen my timeline so aligned as it was against Doc over really the last 2 weeks of this podcast tour he's been on since, the All-Star game was coming up, now when he was at the All-Star game. I'm curious for you at 610-632-0975, and we'll get to phone calls. We also got Gina Mizell coming up from the Philadelphia Inquirer. She's going to join us at 11:30 to talk all things Sixers. I'm curious for you. Who is the biggest villain for you in the decade since the organization chose the path they did to go down? I'm not going to use the phrasing as to not upset some of you.
I hope y'all keep trusting the process.
Tom will do so, but
I did absolutely nothing, actually.
That's a lie. That's a lie. I saw you. YouTube. We'll play the tape back. We all saw you reach to touch that button. So
Joel said it, not myself.
Okay. But once they decided to go down this path, who's been the biggest villain for you in the Sixers? And I think there's one obvious one that a lot of people are going to take. I'm not going to take. I'm going with the man with the big collars. Just because everything that ended up happening, like with him, the fact that one, he wanted to build around Simmons, and two, obviously the Burner Gate and all that stuff that happens, and then you end up the most important offseason since you put that path into motion. You had to put together a makeshift front office, and the drama surrounding that team leading into that offseason led to just really unfortunate turn of events with them. I would say Big Collars is my number one villain from that one.
Interesting. Now, he wouldn't be there if it wasn't for a certain figure who forced him to be with the Philadelphia 76ers, and that's one Adam Silver. So I think you can. I'm not making that argument. I think you could make the argument for Silver. And I'm not saying Hinkie was perfect. I'm not saying Hinkie didn't have his flaws, but to completely force him out of the equation and force in a guy in Colangelo who was as bad as you just mentioned, I think Silver's up there for that conversation as well. To me, though, it's go ahead.
Then you could go even higher. Okay. You could go to the Colangelo that hired the other Colangelo.
That's a good point.
So Jerry or Brian, 610.
There's a lot of. It would be a 10-part documentary when this thing's all said and done. Hopefully, it ends in a positive note. Mine is Ben Simmons, though, as much as there's been a ton of villains. Look, he was supposed to be the guy, and it's one thing if you don't live up to expectation, but when you don't try and when you quit and when you make excuses and when you won't visit with your teammates after they fly out to see you in California, when all it took was one quote by Doc Rivers where just like, yeah, I'm not too sure if I forget the exact quote, but I'm not too sure if you can win a championship with Ben Simmons as your point guard immediately after a heartbreaking game ends. If that's all it took, and now we're seeing what's happening in Brooklyn where he's back and then he's back on the injured list for a week, whatever it may be. I know they don't have an injury list, but you get what I'm saying. But, yes, Ben Simmons just completely quitting, not wanting to play, not liking basketball, and being a big baby through all of it. He is number one villain in the Sixers' last 10-year era.
Yeah, that's who I thought would be most people's selection on that one. I thought that would be the choice. The one thing I will say is it was an all-star. So, if I'm going through guys who've at least done something for the team, I at least thought at some point he would grow into something. The Colangelo era, to me, there's not really a redeeming quality of that one. And obviously the way the Simmons one ends, it's not really a redeeming quality of it either. So I just went with the exec because I was not a big fan of the whole thing, that whole shakedown. But regardless, that was just a little side thing from the fact that we went through a number of former 76ers that were all involved in the drama yesterday, all involved. And it's going to continue as they continue to have the conversation about Doc and, of course, the conversation turned to JJ, Pat Bev getting back into it, Austin Rivers coming to bat for his dad, even though he says he doesn't have to go to bat for his dad. Spencer Hawes going after Austin Rivers for going to bat for his dad, saying that his dad got him. It was a whole thing. It was a great day. Great day if you enjoy theater and enjoy theater with the NBA yesterday. And obviously with the NBA, we're getting close to the stretch run here, the close of this regular season as the All-Star break for the 76ers coming to an end tomorrow when they get back to action hosting the Knicks. And for that, we want to get you ready. We got to prime you and get you ready to go for what will be, I hate calling it the second half because as a numbers guy in my brain, it's not necessarily a half, but basically the second half of this season. You know how this works. We're going to look ahead at what happened. But first, I want to take you to someone who was there for the All-Star game, that was out there in Indy. We're going to go to the Comcast Business Hotline and talk to someone from the Philadelphia Inquirer who I love talking to, covers the 76ers. That's Gina Mizell. Gina, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm surviving the break. It was a one-day All-Star break for yours truly with the Sixers getting back to practice today, but ready for what should be a very interesting, let's call it stretch run of the season. I know you just called it the second half, but it's 28 games, so that is a lot less than 41, so it's the stretch run of the regular season.
See, that's what I hate doing the second half conversation because it's not a half. It bothers me. It's one of those weird things for me that drives me nuts, but I appreciate the stretch run.
Yeah. Right. No, well, it's the halfway point if you take like the NBA season in totality. If you include the playoffs, it's basically the halfway point. But if we're talking regular season, a lot of teams, their seasons are going to be done in 6 weeks or whatever. So it's hopefully not the Sixers, but a lot of teams their season is definitely on the downswing at this point.
You beat me to it right there, saying hopefully this is not just the last 6 weeks. And there's a lot to get into about what's going to happen. I want to take you back to Indianapolis and a little bit of the All-Star experience. Looking at, obviously, Tyrese Maxey getting that first All-Star nod, it also felt like without Embiid there, he really was able to get the full shine, the full spotlight of being the Sixers representative. What did you see? What was anything? Take us a little bit behind the scenes of that first time Maxey really got to shine on the Sunday night stage.
Yeah, he definitely soaked it all in and took advantage of it. He had a huge group of family there, about a dozen people, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, nieces, his best friend. Like, he just brought kind of a whole cavalry with him. And not only just the game on Sunday night, but obviously doing the skills competition. And then I think even maybe more importantly, doing all the stuff that surrounds All-Star Weekend. He did a live taping of his podcast with Asia Wilson. He was going around to, some of the fan events and just really soaking up all of that part of it. There was a giant billboard of him on one of the buildings right across from the convention center, which was kind of the hub of where you could do all kinds of stuff, fan-wise and event-wise. So, you could tell that he was definitely taking it all in, that he wanted to bring the people closest to him who helped him get to this point sort of along for the ride. And, he's hoping that this obviously isn't his last experience as an all-star, but you can't really ever replicate that first time you get to go. And so I think they definitely recognized the specialness of that moment and took advantage of it for sure.
Talk a little bit about recognizing the specialness. I think it's something we do here with Tyrese Maxey, but talking to people and getting to see how some of the league stars and really the league itself reacts to Maxey. What did you take away from the way the rest of the league, the rest of the nation views Tyrese Maxey through the prism of that first All-Star game?
Yeah, he's well liked, first of all, and well respected as far as a guy that's on the rise and someone who just took obviously another leap this season, and impressive the way that he did it and sort of allowed the Sixers to, until Joel Embiid's injury, like really hang in the same position that they had been even without James Harden. So, it's a situation where he's a Kentucky guy, and there were a ton of Kentucky players that made the All-Star team this year, and so they all obviously have a bond. And John Calipari was there, and yeah, just a respect for, he's worked out with LeBron before. He knows a lot of guys through Clutch, his agency, that they've gotten a glimpse of his work ethic, the work he's put in to get to this point, and I think that only, extended to this past weekend. And it was really interesting because at Media Day on Saturday, they kind of put them up on these podiums that I'm sure people have seen if you've watched any video clips. And on one side of the room was Tyrese, and then on the direct opposite side of the room was Doc Rivers, of all people. And, he's just, it was kind of like, wow, this is crazy. And he said that Tyrese was the first guy that he saw when he walked into the locker room to like kind of introduce the East group. And so lots of sort of paths and things coming together. And again, certainly a lot of respect for Tyrese throughout the league just for the work he's put in to get to this point.
Well, it's been quite the 24 hours for Doc Rivers and dialogue around him. Good to know the two of them were on opposite sides. I'll keep it with the Sixers here, and now really focusing in on this stretch run. Obviously, the phrase, this All-Star break could not come at a better time, really fit the 76ers at this time. In terms of health updates and in terms of what you're expecting, obviously, you're on your way to get to practice and see what this team's got. What are you expecting coming out of the break of the number of guys who have been sidelined over the last couple of weeks?
I think we'll have some good news on people other than Joel Embiid, the D'Anthony Meltons of the world, the Nico Batums of the world, like those other starters who have missed time. Tobias Harris, obviously, too. I would expect all or most of them to be good to go after this week off, because they were already starting to do some on-court stuff, some ramping up, as this team likes to say. But it potentially, kind of just held out. It wasn't worth coming back for one game or something like that. So I do expect, unless there was some sort of setback during the break, which is certainly possible, but that those guys will be sort of coming back to full health. And then we'll really get to see what this team looks like with everybody except Joel Embiid, which there have been times this season when they've sort of figured out an identity without him, with Tyrese Maxey being kind of the anchor, but having Tobias Harris, having Nico Batum, D'Anthony Melton, Kyle Lowry, we're expecting to be at practice today, which is another interesting topic to see how he fits in. But yeah, I think if the rest of the group returns to something resembling full health, and Joel is the only player out for the next few weeks or maybe more, then you can really see, okay, can this team put something together and sort of survive and tread water and maybe even excel without Embiid for the next few weeks. So that is what I'm interested to see, and we're certainly going to see how they stack up against really good competition right out of the break, because they've got the Knicks, they've got the Cavs, they've got the Bucks, they've got the Celtics. So hope those guys are ready if you're the Sixers, because that's going to be some tough sledding there coming straight out of this break.
You mentioned that identity without Embiid. What would you place as the identity they're putting forth without Joel Embiid on the floor?
I mean, again, Tyrese has to be the one who sort of takes the lead. And, even before the Embiid surgery, Nick Nurse was on Tyrese about, you need to take 20 shots per game. And so now is that 25? Is that you need to get, obviously, more playmaking, because that was something that Embiid was doing so well out of their two-man game as well. And so I think it does have to start with Tyrese, and there's going to be a lot on his shoulders moving forward. And he has been inconsistent in those types of situations. You've got the 51-point game in Salt Lake a couple weeks ago, and then you've got his horrible, Christmas Day performance. And so him finding some consistency in that type of role, I think, is going to be the biggest key. And then it has got to be guys like Tobias Harris stepping up, Paul Reed not stepping out of his role, but perhaps contributing a little bit more. And some of those complementary players, and obviously Buddy Hield coming over at the trade deadline. that's a guy that's a reason you make that trade, both because he can help you right now, and you think he can also be a great floor spacer if and when Joel Embiid comes back. But we already saw kind of the infancy of Tyrese and Buddy Hield playing off each other, his shooting and his playmaking, which is maybe better than I expected when he came over in the trade a couple weeks ago. But that's going to be a really interesting thing to monitor, too, is how those two guys play off each other and how Buddy Hield kind of fits into this offense with the full roster available coming up.
You kind of walked into it there, and I kind of want to get deeper into that conversation. The post-deadline 76ers, obviously not a huge sample size to pull from, but what was maybe your biggest standout from that timeline following the trade deadline into the All-Star break with that group?
Yeah, I think it was just how quickly Buddy Hield came in and made an impact, whether it was when they were totally depleted in that first game when he had no time to prepare, but maybe more importantly, as those games went along. And once he got to that last game against the Heat and he's dishing out 10 assists and obviously firing from three, which we knew it was what he was going to do. And like I said, kind of just that tandem with Maxey and sort of them learning to play off each other and kind of taking a little pressure off of Tyrese. You know, I just said he's got to anchor the team, but maybe Buddy is able to take a little bit of that pressure off and be that guy that can facilitate a little bit, obviously shoot the ball from deep and sort of be that really nice, not co-star, but that nice backcourt mate that Tyrese maybe needs. And so, yeah, how that all sort of fits together, how Melton now fits back into the equation once he gets back from his back thing will be interesting to watch. And then, of course, again, how Kyle Lowry fits into this whole backcourt thing. So we went from, thinking that the backcourt was thin, and then you add some pieces and Buddy Hield and then Kyle Lowry, and just now seeing how all of those puzzle pieces kind of fit together rotation-wise, minutes-wise, role-wise. I think that's going to be a big task for Nick Nurse coming up, here over the next few weeks.
It's funny because the last time I think the two of us spoke was on one of the Sixers All Access shows, and we were talking about how, okay, you had seen now how this team gelled post-Harden trade and how they had gotten this all figured out. What do you think Nick Nurse right now in his mind is going through in terms of figuring out the pieces of this group, and where do you think he sees, the area of strength and maybe the area that he still has a lot to look at and a lot to consider?
Well, he's known, guys, as a tactical genius. I've heard that word used by multiple players that have played for him, so I'll go ahead and use it. But a guy who's known for his creativity and his experimentation, and do you necessarily want to be doing it at this point in the season? Probably not, but this is where his mind and his creativity and his ability to, or willingness, I guess, to try a lot of different things, I think is going to be really key. And so, no, again, it's finding an identity offensively when Joel is not kind of the hub of everything. And then it's finding an identity defensively when Joel is not the anchor who's able to rim protect. And, Paul Reed can block some shots, Mo Bamba. That's what they want him to do when he comes into the game. But it's just different. And, they definitely still want to be aggressive. They want to now shoot more threes with Buddy Hield in the fold, which that's something that he had downplayed earlier in the season when they weren't putting up a lot of threes. But I think you're going to see that obviously a lot more without Embiid and with Buddy Hield now in the lineup and playing heavy minutes. So those are a couple of things that, again, it's going to be really fascinating to sort of monitor, like what they land on and what they try these, coming out of the break and sort of how they're able to what they're able or how they're able to settle on something until Joel comes back, whenever that is, which is obviously still very uncertain right now.
And now looking at, and this is really the last one for you. You mentioned a couple of players obviously playing around. Maxey's the driving force of what will happen without Embiid. We got into this topic yesterday of the player that you feel is probably under the most pressure to perform alongside Maxey as we move towards this stretch run. Who do you think that would be?
I mean, is it Tobias Harris? Is it Paul Reed? It kind of just depends on how you view that because, again, Tobias Harris has been one of the most highly criticized athletes, I would say, in the city in recent years, almost purely because of his contract and also some inconsistencies when he's needed to or been asked to sort of hold a bigger crunch time role, a bigger offensive consistency load. So I would go there. And then just, I think, the pressure of being a guy that needs to fill in for Joel Embiid. Paul Reed's done it a little bit in short stretches, like during the playoffs a couple years ago, but he's done a better job, I would say, in the last few games of not trying to do too much, of still like fulfilling his role. But I'm sure there are times when you feel the pressure of that, especially when a couple weeks ago he goes out and scores 30 points against Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. So I think I point to those two guys. I don't know if there's anybody else that maybe I'm just blanking on that I'm not thinking of, but it's like as far as the pecking order, I would go Maxey and then those other guys, just because one has to fill in directly for Joel Embiid, and the other one is kind of the guy that is paid like a second or third option and doesn't always play like it. So that's sort of where I land on those two things.
Well, Gina, I appreciate it as always. Thank you so much. We love your insight. Always love getting a chance to talk to you. And, stretch run, I'm sure we'll be talking plenty coming up over the next couple of weeks.
All right, no problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Gina. That's Gina Mizell on the Comcast Business Hotline. Covers the 76ers for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Of course, Comcast Business Every Day Business is a big day. Let Comcast Business keep you ready for what's next. Now, mentioned there the pressure. Went back to Tobias. Tobias, the one that both of us yesterday were just kind of, oh, yeah, there should be pressure on Tobias. Why we didn't think of that originally tells you more about the way we feel about Tobias. But a couple of good things in there, especially with the way they're going to approach things, the way things are going to change, and trying to find an identity without Joel Embiid. I think really interesting. We'll react to that. We'll talk about it with you at 610-632-0975 coming up in the next segment. And also in the next segment, towards the end there, we will get to, some of the conversation, I will say, because I'm not going to use the word report to dignify what was said yesterday. Some of the conversation surrounding what's going on with the Birds. But, of course, we thank Gina for joining the show. We'll react to what she had to say on the other side and take your phone calls with it, 610-632-0975. I'm Ray Dunn, in for Andrew Salchunas here on the Midday Show, here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
I would say no.
I'm Ray Dunn. In for Andrew Salchunas here on the Midday Show here on 97.5 The Fanatic. I'm really appreciating the commitment to the bit, Tom. I really am.
Yeah, it's not stopping anytime
It's
soon.
making me laugh every time it happens. So I appreciate that. But yes, Andrew will be back Monday. Connor will be with you Thursday and Friday. So this is our last day. You got 2 more hours to hang out with me. Best show ever. Take it over at 2 o'clock as it'll be Connor and Silvana for the next 2 days. Tom and I took you through the first 3 days of the middays this week. And I want to thank Gina Mizell for joining us from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Covers the 76ers. Always enjoy getting a chance to talk with her and getting a chance to pick her brain about this team. And a couple of things to take away from that. And we will get back to some Eagles conversation. And shockingly, the two of us have done a show together for the first time in our lives. In the first 2 hours, we have not hit the Phillies really at all. And we will have some stuff to talk to. Matt Gilba was on with Best Show Ever. We'll probably get to some of that as well in the final 2 hours of the show. But just reacting to what Gina had to say about the team, looking at their identity without Embiid, and it really went back to Maxey. And I think about a 1 o'clock hour on Monday where it was just Tyrese. 25 shots per game. The thought process there, this team now taking threes, which is an all-time spin from Nick Nurse. When you don't have a team that is really built to fire away like that, and when they don't have Embiid, they don't necessarily have the spacing where they can fire away like that. They're like, you know what? 3-pointers? We don't need them. Trade for Buddy Hield. Trade for Campaign. All of a sudden, going to get Melton back. Batum come back. Yeah, you know what? We could shoot threes now. We could take threes. That's refreshing to hear, I'll be honest. One, because being able to space it and being able to have guys on the perimeter that actually can knock them down gives a little bit of the lane for Maxey to be able to attack that help side, not really there. I love using the phrase gravity. It's become my favorite NBA term that everyone uses. Oh, the gravity of this player pulls you this way, pulls that way, and it's just become one of the hot button things. Like in other sports, the spin rate is the hot button on baseball, where it's spin. Look at the spin on it. All very legitimate analysis, but the word is probably overused with it. But the fact that you have guys that actually could step out and knock down threes. Hield, you have a guy that actually could take someone off the dribble from the three-point arc. Just, again, looking at some of the different things, the health updates that came through, expecting just about everyone back out of this break, which is good to know, good to really feel about this team, because when we talk about them being without Embiid, they're not just without Embiid right now. When you look at the starting lineup they began this season with, and again, with trades, this has changed a bit, but they're without a number of their starters. And what stuck out to Gina over that first stretch without him, just, again, Reed playing a little bit better, Hield, and them committing to taking those 3-pointers. It is interesting, though. We brought up who's under the most pressure. She went immediately to Tobias, Paul Reed. She did say, if I'm blanking on it, Buddy Hield was not one that came to mind. Buddy Hield, I believe, was your selection yesterday. But I think Tobias ultimately is the right answer that neither one of us had. That the pressure should be on Tobias, but our expectations about Tobias tell us that we're not going to say, you know what, that's the person that needs to step up, because we don't believe necessarily that is what's going to happen. Did you have anything you took away from from our conversation there with Gina?
Well, it's nice to hear that she expects the Sixers to be at full health coming out of the All-Star break, which is a nice little change of pace. I'll say that much, because the last month of the season, not just Joel Embiid, it seems like you've been missing 3 or 4 starters every single game, whether it's because of injury or because of illness, whatever it may be. So hopefully this week off has gotten people healthy, both sickness-wise and health-wise. So that was good to hear. The other thing is she mentioned about finding. It takes them time to finding an identity, without Joel Embiid. And this team obviously looks a lot different without Joel Embiid and having Tyrese Maxey as their number one option. Being able to get all these guys back, hopefully no other major injuries coming up or even minor injuries coming up, being able to get this full squad together and Nick Nurse putting together a game plan with this full squad, along with Buddy Hield, along with hopefully Kyle Lowry soon, and then along with Tyrese Maxey again as the number one option. I'm very excited to actually, it gives them a chance, right? Like, it gives Nick Nurse an opportunity to go out there and be able to game plan something up, put this team in the best position possible. Then we're going to start learning a ton about what this team's ceiling actually is without Joel Embiid. So just Nick Nurse being able to get these guys back and having the opportunity to run the offense and defense, I guess he wants to run, with Tyrese Maxey at the helm, I think that's a positive for the Philadelphia 76ers.
And now looking at it, the interesting part, the tactical genius of Nick Nurse. And, go back, play the tape. I was all fired up for Nick Nurse. I think I'm thrilled with what he's done so far this season. I haven't really had a chance to talk to you about the way you feel, but I think you feel pretty similar to the rest of the city. I don't think people have yet to have the, oh, man, this guy feeling with the coach so far.
Yeah, it's a breath of fresh air. I feel like we're bagging on Doc a little bit too much today, and I'm not saying that all of what happened the past couple of years was just on Doc. I don't think that's fair to say. I think your stars didn't come up big when they needed to. But I say it all the time. I think you have a legit difference maker at head coach. I don't know how many of them there are in the NBA. I think there's a few that are difference makers. I think there's a few that are not so great and probably aren't ready to have that job. And then I think there's a huge middle section there, a huge middle pack. I think Nick Nurse leans more towards the difference maker. I truly believe that. He hasn't really been given the opportunity as of late, but look what he did to start the season, especially when he had all his guys healthy, like Kelly Oubre, Nico Batum, and, of course, Joel Embiid. I think you have a difference maker, and I'm excited to see what he can do with this full squad minus Joel Embiid.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part of I think back to the last couple of seasons. I think back to a large number of these seasons, and one of the prevailing storylines that came out of these seasons, I think back to the year where they traded for Harden midseason. And the storyline at the end of the season, well, they got together midway through the season. Can you really expect them to put it together by the end? You think about the year where they play the Raptors, and it's like, well, look at all the moving parts they had throughout the season. Did you really expect them to be able to put it together there by the end of the season? Are you concerned that we head down that path of that mindset, of that thought process again this year? Because it's a storyline that I imagine would emerge. It's not one anyone wants to hear, but is there enough time for this group? Like, we have talked plenty about whether there's enough time for Embiid to heal, but it struck me as Gina and I were speaking that we had been talking for one of the Sixers All Access shows. I want to say January timeline. Like, yeah, it really feels like this team is started to figure out, hey, this, the role for this player, the role for that player. And obviously, trade deadline's coming. There's going to be changes. And I think it was before Embiid had gone down. So it was okay. We didn't have that in the brain quite yet. And we were like, okay, yeah, we're starting to find the fits here, find the roles. And you, again, expected something to happen. But are you afraid, a little fearful of that storyline coming back? Because in the back of my head, as we're talking about it, I was like, I've heard the story about trying to figure out how to gel in this stretch run before, and my Sixers PTSD has me a little. It just, like, alarm bells went off a little bit with that.
No, I'm really not concerned about these guys being able to gel to have enough time. I'm worried about Joel Embiid getting back in time to gel with these guys. I'm worried about this team, this squad without Joel Embiid being good enough to stay afloat to avoid a play-in game. Those things worry me, but when it comes to enough time to gel, that's not something that crosses my mind. I'll be honest. She said, 28 games remaining, I believe it is. I think 28 games is plenty of time to get gelled together with this squad. So, yeah, to me, I have I have concerns, I'll say. I have some question marks with this Sixers team. Health is a big one as well. But when it comes to having enough time to gel, I think, 2 months and 28 games, I think that's plenty of time for Nick Nurse to figure it out.
And the flip side of the conversation we had the other day about how tough the schedule is the rest of the way, you're not going to be able to look at this team and say, well, they
No.
figured it out, but they figured it out against bottom.
Who are they playing?
Yeah.
No.
I think, honestly, this next four, one sets the tone a lot for what the rest of this way is going to look like. It's not, again, fair necessarily, but it's your schedule. You have to play it. The way we talk about, you just play. If we're going through a stretch where it's bad teams, you play the schedule in front of you. You play the schedule in front of you. Whether it's fair or not to expect this team to be able to pull it together, at least we're going to see a healthier version of it. They get this tough 4-game stretch, and now it kind of sets the tone for the way the rest of this season's going to go. We could do the old, what's the the worst they could do for you to still feel good about this 4-game stretch. But ultimately, it's going to be about how they play, them finding their play style against some of the top teams in the East.
And it's not just the top teams in the East. There's a lot of top teams you're playing over here. It's not just the fact that they're playing a tougher schedule down the stretch. I see a good amount of back-to-backs. I see a good amount of 2 games in 4 days and 3 games in 5 days. And I see a lot of ats on this schedule that I'm currently looking on CBS Sports for the Philadelphia 76ers. And I see another West Coast road trip late in March. Yeah, man, this is going to be tough. Like, I remember looking back to last season and when the schedule came out last year, looking at the end of the season, like, man, this is a juggernaut of a schedule for the end of the season for the Sixers. How are they going to survive this? They ended up doing so because Joel Embiid was healthy for a majority of it, and James Harden was a very, very good player in the regular season, much like he is this season. Now you look at it and it's like this is an even tougher schedule, you could argue, towards the end of the year, and you're, of course, without the MVP of the league and probably would have been MVP of this season. So, good luck, McVeers.
Yeah.
Have at 'em.
So I'll just take you till let's take you through middle of March. You get the Knicks 3 times. This is the one home game of those 3 times coming up tomorrow night. You get Cleveland once. You get Milwaukee, Boston. And then, of course, there's a little bit of a reprieve when you get Charlotte at home. You go to Dallas. You go to Brooklyn. You know, not to downplay Dallas as a team, but versus, you know, as compared to some of the teams that you're getting.
Still good players, Bridges and Luka on those 2 teams. But, yes, a little bit easier than some of the other teams. Favorable.
Then you go to Memphis, or you get Memphis here, and you get New Orleans here. It's like, okay, that, you know, again, if New Orleans and Dallas are talking about your reprieves, that should tell you a little bit about what you're going. I mentioned those New York games. You get Milwaukee again, this time on the road in the middle of March. Like, that's not a – you get Milwaukee twice, the Knicks 3 times, Cleveland, Boston. It's not an easy schedule. That doesn't even include the end of March where your sleep schedule is going to be ruined.
Yeah, West Coast. Awesome. Can't wait.
I know. You're thrilled. When this schedule came out, that was the first day I looked for. I was like, oh, man.
I thought there was only one damn West Coast trip every single year. We got 2 this year for some reason.
I'm sorry, man.
Whatever.
I'll try and console you with the fact that the one Clippers game is at 3:30 in the afternoon, so that's not as bad for you.
Saturday matinee, is that what it is?
Sunday. Sunday.
Very nice.
Yeah,
Love
so
that.
you'll be able to.
I'll take that. That's a great game, by the way, too. To have on 3:30. It's probably national TV, I'm assuming. Right?
It's not listed. I assume it will be. It's not listed as a national TV game.
Well, I guess Harden wasn't traded till in season, so maybe that gets switched. But that's a great game nonetheless.
I can assure you that LA's return to Philadelphia is on national TV.
Good.
That will be Wednesday, March 27th, for anyone that's marking the calendars. And by the way, this Sunday, since this is the last time you'll be hearing me before that, this Sunday, we've talked so much about Doc in the last 24 hours. That is the return of one Doc Rivers as the Bucks come to town.
On this Sunday to Philadelphia.
Sunday,
How about that?
25th on ABC.
What time?
1 o'clock.
Okay, nice. There you go. Little Sunday.
So, also, this is something that Dawood checked in with this off of our talk about the drama. JJ Redick on the call for any Bucks games coming up?
I hope so.
JJ Redick, I don't know, if they're elevating him to lead crew. Would he be on the ABC? Could we?
I would think so, right?
Could I get the center of Philadelphia complex for the Sixers-Bucks game with JJ on the call? I don't know. The Bucks are on ESPN also Friday night.
See, that's part of a whole different conversation, but that's part of the problem kind of with the setup that ESPN and other platforms, I guess you could say, have is JJ Redick, if you want him to be announcing games, you want him to be part of the broadcast team, that's what he should be, part of your broadcast team. The problem is he also is doing other things like podcasts and coming up on First Take, it seems like once a week. It's just kind of problematic because you run into these issues, which is extremely entertaining for us, but then you have him calling a game with a guy that he says basically is always blaming other people and never looking in the mirror, and he's 10 feet away from calling his game.
Well, it's okay because even the guys that don't do that, I'm thinking about Van Gundy. Like, you've heard them go on their diatribes with opinions. Like, I get what you're saying.
But it's never usually too harsh, I feel like. Like, what Redick said yesterday was pretty harsh on First Take. I think that some of those other guys, like, they don't like certain players and certain coaches, but, man, like, Redick went on a rant for, like, 2 minutes straight, and he does it pretty often. I'm not saying anything against Redick or anything like that, but it's a tricky situation.
I don't know, man. The Redick accountability thing with Rivers or the Van Gundy Embiid diatribe what was it, a month ago or something?
Yeah, he just doesn't it seems like he's not a huge fan of Embiid. That's what it seems like.
Oh,
I
it doesn't
don't
seem
know.
like J.J. Redick's a big fan. Doc, I get what you're saying. And this is also coming from someone that, toes the line of broadcast and radio. So opinionated. Yeah. I don't, give opinions on the things I call on these airwaves, so it doesn't really cross over the same way Redick does. But when you get these $1 million deals with guys, they have to utilize J.J. Redick in every way possible because they.
Sure.
If Redick wants to be a analyst, guess what? That saves them from hiring someone to appear on their airwaves, and the appearance fees are not as many people under contract.
What I can't wait for is how we talked about yesterday, how Redick wants to be a head coach potentially. Maybe that's a little bit why there's sour grapes with Doc Rivers. What I can't wait for is Redick becomes a head coach and his GM decides to pick up Austin Rivers on a 10-day contract. That is what I can't wait for.
No way. Not in this timeline. Not in this world. Not in this timeline. But would that be entertaining?
Fair enough.
Well, it's just so funny because they're both on the same network on the same day.
Yes. 4 hours apart from each other.
I would watch you sit them down across from each other and just Doc Rivers. I don't care. Whoever you want to moderate it in the middle. You know what? Throw a perk in the middle of the two of them. Just say Doc Rivers. Let them go fight one another. I would be interested to see it. Austin Rivers also starting that with, I don't have to step up for my dad here. But, I would be, it would be an awesome thing if Austin Rivers was just yeah, JJ's got a point, man.
Yeah, he's right. Man, I can't really defend him anymore. Sorry, Pops.
Yeah, Doc doesn't really wash the dishes at home. He blames us. It was always an account. But, that would, to me, would have been the funnier thing. I was Austin Rivers defending his dad. I get it. I was in Austin Rivers' shoes. Yeah, of course. I had the platform to do it. I would absolutely go about it.
Yeah.
But also the Duke people right now. Which side do they take? Austin Rivers, J.J. Redick. I mean, this is tough stuff. This is the hard-hitting questions that we've got for the Duke audience out there. I mentioned this, and we'll play it in the next segment. We also have Matt Breen coming up in the next segment. Craig Carton. Wow. So, yeah, something's wrong with the Philadelphia Eagles. I think we established that in watching the Philadelphia Eagles and the fact that, actual reporters, those that were, reporting on the team inside that locker room, talking to people every day, had their thought process on it. Craig Carton on FS1 yesterday, he just decided, you know what? It's time to insert myself into the narrative about the Philadelphia Eagles. Had something to say. We're going to play that for you. I know we've done on this show a couple of times the media conversation. I'm not necessarily going to turn it into the media conversation. I'm just going to let the, reporter who was on with the John Kincaid show this morning and Adam Schefter respond to it. I'll get Tom's thoughts on it. I'll take all of your thoughts on it as well at 610-632-0975. Plus, again, it is a Breen day here. We're going to talk to Matt Breen of the Philadelphia Inquirer coming up in the next segment. Get his thoughts on a whole bunch of things. We haven't really dove in to the Phillies in this one, but I got a couple of questions for him. Coming to the Phillies, looking at the 76ers, and, of course, into the Eagles, because as he does every time he comes on with us, he can jump into just a little bit of everything, and we love when he's able to do that for us. So we will talk to him coming up in the next segment. And again, Craig Carton just had to talk. He does. That is actually his job. He does have to talk, but had to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles and did my least favorite way of reporting. Is it always, it's I know something. You don't know something. I know something. I'm not going to say what I know, but I'm just going to say that something's going on, and you don't get it. So, okay, fair enough. He gets to say that. We get to react to it. We'll take your reactions to it at 610-632-0975. And again, Matt Breen coming up in the next segment as we continue on here on the Midday Show. I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchin here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
Back into the midday show here on 97.5 The Fanatic. I'm Ray Dunn hanging out with you. In for Andrew Salchunas. Tom Alvord with me as we continue on here into the 12 o'clock hour at this point. I'll let you know our 12 o'clock hour is brought to you by Service First Heating and Air Conditioning. Get 0% financing for 72 months and a $500 rebate when you purchase a complete heating and cooling system from Service First. Learn more at ServiceFirstHVAC.com. Getting into plenty of Eagles to start the show. We've been to a lot of Sixers recently. I want to go back into a little Eagles conversation as just teased it going into the break. And Tom and I, honestly, today, I said this is what we were going to get into. I didn't really gauge a reaction to what he had to say, mostly because I was waiting, the old don't do the show before the show type of thing, but also just because I want to get the raw, unfiltered reaction to this. I loved listening to Schefter on the way in, react to it. But if you missed it, yesterday on FS1, it was Craig Carton. He had a bit to say on the Eagles. And listen, I don't, I know what it takes. You talk for a long time in this industry. Maybe you slip up a little. This one, I can't with this one. This one bothered me to just listen to of like, seriously, dude, because it's this type of reporting that gets under my nerves. And we're going to have Matt Breen on it at 12:30, and I look forward to asking him, the journalist here, to talk about it a little bit. And I think at some point, Matt Breen might just sit down, Andrew and I, for a journalism class, because I feel like every time we have one on Wednesday, there's something media-related that comes up with him that we want to just pick his brain to see his reaction to it. So maybe we'll just go back to school with Matt Breen coming up at 12:30 of the Philadelphia Inquirer. But let's take a listen. First, we all know what happened with the Philadelphia Eagles. If you don't, I advise you don't look it up. It was not fun. The end of this season, brutal. It was disgusting to watch. Very, very frustrating. Craig Carton says, he might have an idea of what went wrong.
I can tell you that it is a problem that would splinter any group of men. Any group of men. It is a real significant problem.
Yeah, I know it is.
It cannot be fixed.
Oh,
so, I'm not going to say any more than that, but I know what the problem was. I know they're trying to fix it, and I don't think it can be fixed. So it would be very interesting to see if a high-profile player is no longer with the Eagles going into this season. And by the way, maybe he will be. But I'll be interested to see if he is.
I know something. I can't tell you. I know something. Something went wrong. Something bad went wrong. Something that a group of men couldn't remedy amongst themselves. Because that group of men can't figure it out amongst themselves. It's going to mean someone's leaving because something happened. Well, he might not leave also. Let's be clear here. I'm telling you that a high-profile player might leave. Probably is going to leave, but also he might not leave because of something that happened that I can't tell you. Okay? Just dancing around with what it might be. And listen, did it go poorly at the end? Do I pretend to know the intimate details of these people's lives? No. But it is very, very interesting. A guy that has a, let's say, checkered record on telling the truth when it comes to, I'm just going sports teams here. I'm just strictly talking about his sports content when it comes to Carton. A bit of a past in terms of telling the truth when it comes to sports teams, to the point where it's gotten him in some trouble in the past. I'm supposed to take him at his word. Now, as he does every Wednesday, Adam Schefter joined the John Kincaid Show. And, well, he had a reaction. And I want to play you the full reaction to Schefter to, again, this idea, this notion thrown out there by Craig Carton.
By the way, I don't even know if the National Enquirer would write something like that. And by the way, I texted somebody in the organization yesterday. I'm like, what is this? And the text back, the quote was, none of that S word happened. None of that S happened. That's what qualifies, as a reporter. You can just go say whatever you want, and it gets clicks, and people hear about it. Was somebody with another player's woman, or who knows? I'm just telling you, somebody in the organization, was pretty adamant yesterday. None of that happened.
Now, of course, the organization itself is going to shoot down anything that's said about anything with regards to like something like that. So I'm not saying that, again, nothing was amiss with that locker room. Something clearly was not right with the team. Do I think a lot went wrong with that team that we watched on the field, and there was enough to see on the field where things were going wrong? Yeah. I'm not even going to, again, pretend like I know the personal lives of all those people. But Craig Carton, am I supposed to take that man at his word on something that he heard that may result in someone leaving, may not result in someone leaving, that he's monitoring, that he heard, again, but can't tell you, doesn't want to tell you, but he really wants you to know he knows something? It's the worst type of reporting. It really is. It's I have an idea of what happened, but I've got this information you want. And guess what you wait for? You wait for something to happen, and you say, see, I told you. I told you something was going to happen. I told you something was going to. Something always happens because this is the NFL. This is professional sports. People move on to different things all the time. It's the most obnoxious form of coverage. Tom, but he's going through this. And again, of course the organization is going to shut down anything where it's some wild, just thrown out there rumor about, no group of men would recover from this. Can you imagine a group of men being able to deal with something like this happening, whatever, again, Craig Carton is trying to allude to. Of course they're going to shoot it down. I do like the fact that Schefter kind of laughed at it because, again, this is a guy that in the past, again, sports content only I'm talking about. I'm only getting into sports content. Has quite the track record with telling the truth to the point where it's gotten him in trouble. When you see something like this, what is your reaction to Craig Carton saying this on FS1?
Yeah, it's really it's a really bad job. It's like almost malpractice. That's not something that you can do. It's not something, and look, as you mentioned, the organization is going to come to the defense of their players. And of course, Adam Schefter, they are going to give him information that whatever Carton said was positive. And not true. And I'm not saying that there isn't issues in the Philadelphia Eagles locker room. Hopefully, it was just a problem last year. And it's as simple as they didn't believe in the coaches, and simple as that. We got new coaches. We're good. Maybe it's more. Who knows? But to say that you know something, dangle it out there in front of people, but say, oh, yeah, but I can't tell you. Oh, yeah, but you'll never know. Yeah, I can't tell you. But I know, but you'll never know. That's just a really bad job. And what? He talked to one source maybe in the Eagles locker room, if he has it all, and he's going to just run with a complete crazy story because he's heard from one source. And the fact that I think of it is, if it's something that insane, that crazy, how is Craig Carton the only person in the world? We have a lot of reporters in that locker room at all times. How is he the only one that's ever heard anything? So to me, this is just a bad job all the way around. And yeah, I don't really think we should be paying it a ton of mind.
Yeah, that's why it didn't come up till later in the program, just because.
No, it's worth addressing, absolutely, but it's not something people should be going crazy about.
I'm going crazy in the sense that it just drives me nuts to have to deal with.
Yeah.
And also it's one of those things that we went back, if you remember, a couple weeks ago, Kay Adams it was leading up to the Super Bowl, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, and I think she phrased the question of something, what am I hearing when it comes to, like, people talking about you being traded? And it's one of those things that when certain shows, when media runs with an idea, and Craig Carton has a national platform, a platform in which, it's on the air, people watch it, and of course the clip goes viral. If you're not inside of Philadelphia, you could be sitting there with the idea, this Carton guy's got in-depth knowledge on the birds. Like, he might have something here. Like, what's it going into? That's where it's like, this is kind of a damaging type of, okay, I don't want this to be something that takes hold and is run with, It's a little much, which is, I think,
Definitely.
That's part of the reason why it bothers me, because it's like, the kind of the platform responsibility on that one to understand that that now you've basically said a high-profile player may not. It's just drives me nuts, honestly. Just, again, that type of reporting, that type of wild running speculation, give me a break with it a little bit. And I'm sure not everything was all roses in that locker room. I'm not saying everything was all roses in that locker room. I'm not trying to, paint a beautiful picture of what was a disappointing end of the season. But I'm also telling you that I'm not going to sit here with the Craig Carton conversation of, oh, yeah, there was something there. And now all of a sudden, it's all broken and terrible. But whatever. That's, again, a media conversation that we've had a couple of times here. Now, as for someone that I trust, someone I enjoy talking to, someone I always enjoy catching up with, it's a Breen Day here on the Midday Show here on 97.5 The Fanatic. It's Matt Breen from the Philadelphia Inquirer on the Comcast Business Hotline. Comcast Business, every day in business is a big day. Let Comcast Business keep you ready for what's next. Matt Breen, how are you?
I'm good, Ray. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to have you. I appreciate you jumping in with us today. And I'll start with what we were talking about just leading into you. Craig Carton had something to say on the Birds. And yes, thank you. That's exactly the response I was looking for on that one. That type of reporting drives me crazy. For you, someone who actually is the day-to-day journalist, how do you react to something like that just being thrown out there on a national show?
Yeah, when people are teasing stuff, to me it seems like there's nothing there if you're teasing it. If you're like, oh, I'll tell you more tomorrow, or here's this, but I can't tell you everything, then you must not have the goods. So is it off base to think that the Eagles could have, strife in their locker room? No, from the outside point of view, watching last season, I think we all thought that, but to go on the national radio and on your social media accounts and tease that you have this tidbit and calling people sheep and stuff, it's just like, it just seems more look at me than look at the information I have, and that's where kind of I see it.
Yeah, you and I could sit here today and say, wow, it looked like there was a problem inside the locker room, without actually saying, oh, I've got this piece of information. You want to know it, but I know it, and you won't get a chance to know it, but there's something wrong there. It's like, okay, dude, you're just throwing something at the wall and hoping that at some point someone high profile leaves so you can say that you were right.
Yeah, do you know it or not? And I'm not going to beg you for it, but if you really know something and you're going to report it, just report it. If not, then just be quiet about it.
Exactly. All right, moving off of that into things that we can actually get into and have actual real conversation beyond just people speculating nonsense. There was something we opened the show with today. It was the teetering contenders conversation. So ESPN put out this list of tiers for the teams going into next season. It was Jeremy Fowler writing a piece on all 32 teams. And the Eagles end up in this teetering contenders conversation. I'm curious for you, if I posed the question to you, do you think when we talk teetering, they're teetering close to getting back to that contender place going into this offseason, or do you see them teetering back towards that middle of the pack in the NFL?
So how many teams are in their category? Like how many?
It's them and the Bengals. They are in the top 10 of teams in the NFL when it comes to that third tier of teams. So it's them and the Bengals, the only two in their tier with them.
I think that's fair. There's because I think highly of the Bengals too. Just like I think highly of the Eagles, and there's obviously question marks about important positions and with the Eagles. So I think they belong in the top 10. Top 10 in the NFL is an elite spot to be in. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can't put them in the top 3 or top 4 based on what happened last year. And really, so much uncertainty on this roster right now. You don't know what a lot of key spots are going to look like next year. You're still waiting to see what the offensive line is going to look like. Defensive backfield and the linebackers probably have to get rebuilt. You're still waiting for Fletcher Cox to see what's going to happen there. So I think there's a lot of questions. Obviously, the development of the quarterback. Now you have often new coordinators on both sides of the ball, but they are in that Bengal tier. I think that's fair. The Bengals, the same thing. A team that was in the Super Bowl a couple seasons ago, obviously missed Joe Burrow last year, kind of have the similar types of questions that the Eagles have. So the adjective seems strange because to me that seems like a team that's not, you're not really there if that's the group you're in. But I think the placement is fine.
Yeah, I think the placement with them is fine. I was more looking for the direction because when I hear the word teetering, it makes me think, okay, which way, if this was a seesaw, which way would you see this one rising or going towards? in terms of like, okay, you see this one dropping towards that next. I think middle of the pack is the 5th tier. The true contenders is the 1st tier. So if you're 2 tiers away from being mediocre or 2 tiers away from being in contention, which way would you actually point the arrow for the Birds?
I would point it up, but to be completely honest, I was pointing it up midway through last year, right? Just like everybody else was. And then everything fell apart where I'm just really curious to see how this roster is constructed this offseason, how they attack the draft, and then what happens next year. I think that's the thing. We really have no idea how this team's going to look next year, how they're going to play. It could go both ways, but I still feel highly about the quarterback. I still feel highly about the team. I like the coordinator hires on both sides. I think they're in a good spot. But like I said, I thought they were in a good spot coming down the stretch last year, and everything fell apart. So I guess nobody knows, and I think it's fair to put them in right there at that 10 spot. It could go down. I think they will be one of the elite teams in the NFC. 49ers are still going to be tough to get through, but I still think they are a top 10 team in the NFL, which is a hard place to be.
We're talking to Matt Breen of the Philadelphia Inquirer here, and I want to take you now to another team in town. You're talking about roster building, and they've built this roster now with the hope of getting their big man back, and that's the 76ers. Down this stretch run, we posed the question yesterday. I'm curious to get your thoughts on it. Outside of Tyrese Maxey, who do you think is under the biggest pressure on this Sixers team to perform to get them where they need to be for the return or potential return of Joel Embiid?
I guess it's Tobias Harris, just because you're paying him a lot of money, and he also is going to be a free agent, so he's got pressure on himself to finish strong. But you're going to need guys like that step up when Embiid's out. And obviously, you talked about Maxey and how important he is, but I don't think he can do it all by himself. And I think this is a stretch run for Harris to have a big finish to his season. And really, the most important thing for me is that they avoid a playing game. And they ended this not the first half, but they entered the All-Star break playing fairly well. So if they keep that going, just avoid a playing game, and Embiid returns in the playoffs, and that's best case scenario. And I think that's got to be the goal right now.
And you mentioned that stretch right before the All-Star break. For you, the biggest takeaways, again, small sample size from post-deadline to the All-Star break. What did you like from what you see, maybe what you didn't like from what you saw out of the Sixers group as they, again, reshaped that roster at the deadline?
Well, I liked obviously you went and got Kyle Lowry about the roster. I think that's great. Excited to see what he looks like coming off the bench in a role where you can really manage his minutes. You're not asking for a ton. He's obviously in his mid-30s now. He's not a fresh kid out of college. So you can manage his minutes, get the most out of him. But really what I liked was the adjustments that Nick Nurse made. And that was what you went out and got this guy to be. As you went out and got a basketball savant head coach to be able to make these adjustments. And there's no bigger adjustment to have to make than being without one of the best players in the world. So I thought it took some time. Like they looked awful for a couple games without Embiid, and then it seemed like it got better. Now you had a week off before tomorrow night to really game plan more. And I think you're going to see creativity from Nick Nurse, and that's going to be, you talk about who's going to need the biggest impact here. It's really going to be the coach, because this is where your game plan isn't just built around one player. It's going to be, making the most out of everybody. And I think you got the right guy, where a year ago, adjustments was not what the Sixers did. Now they clearly were making adjustments. They have a good head coach in there, and I think if they can survive this stretch without Embiid, it's going to be because of that.
Now, one of the things we love, we could just work around the sports landscape here. I want to take you down to Clearwater. I want to take you to spring training. I want to take you to the storyline of this Bryce Harper extension. What do you make of this ask right now from him, and just what the team should do in this scenario?
It's kind of like there's two sides to the coin. All right, you signed the contract, and you didn't ask for opt-outs, and at the time it was the biggest contract in North American professional sports. It's this huge number. So you have to honor your contract, right? Just like the Phillies have to honor the contract. But so much has changed since then. He's now, I think his average annual value is like the 40th most in baseball, or 38th. It's like a crazy low number for a guy that is not just one of the best players in baseball, but probably the number one most, at least outside of Ohtani, like the number one most marketable player. So makes a ton of money for the organization. We all know that, and performs on the field. So he wants a raise. He doesn't really want an extension. I don't think that it's a funny way to phrase it. Like, he just wants a raise. He wants to redo his contract. Obviously, you tack on the years to say it was an extension, but he wants more money, and he wants to be paid like the market value, which doesn't happen in sports, right? And in football a little bit because contracts are so weird, but this doesn't happen. And it definitely doesn't happen in baseball. So it's going to set a precedent, and I think the Phillies should do it. They should. It's Bryce Harper. You're not making, a deal for a lesser guy. It's like this is your team. This is your franchise. This is the biggest player here in 15 years. So you make an exception here. You're paying Bryce Harper, but you have to be careful because these owners all work in lockstep, where it's now a precedent for contracts going forward that they can, even without opt-outs. Like Machado had an opt-out, he was able to opt out, re-up, and make more money. But without opt-outs, the guys are going to be able to now say that they want to renegotiate their contract. So that's what I think is probably the biggest holdup. But I think it happens. I think they pay him. He obviously deserves more money, and it's like deserves more money. Like we're talking about it as if it's fake, but you can't think of it as like day-to-day lives. These guys make crazy money. That is what it is. And I think he deserves to be one of the most paid players in baseball, and that's probably how this will end.
All right, and speaking of contracts, this is the first time we're talking to you since the Whit Merrifield signing. What'd you make of that signing? What'd you make of what the role he will play for this baseball team?
It seems like he's a guy that's been talked about forever coming here. And finally happens, but he can play all three outfield spots, which is great versatility, especially with the uncertainty about not only Marsh's injury, but really what you have in Rojas. So he gives you at least a bench spot, can then play in the outfield. And if he can stand at second base or play first base here and there, that's doable. He's mostly an outfielder. But he's at least a guy that he's been productive, was productive for a good chunk of last year. I think it's fine. I thought it's good. Like, you knew going into this spring training, they obviously did not do much besides Nola, but there are a lot of guys like Merrifield that were still available, and they had money to spend, and you were almost waiting, like you knew the market's going to dwindle down for these guys. The price is going to come down to the Philly sweet spot, and they struck. And I would not be surprised if they're like not a major signing, but I think there will be more of that, or at least they could get another. As opening day is here in a month away now. I think you'll see that you could potentially see even more.
Well, I like the sound of that. But, Matt, I want to give you the opportunity here. What we got cooking? What's coming next on the Inquirer for you?
I just finished it this morning. I talked to Kyle Lowry. We had actually mentioned this last week, but I talked to all four guys that started at Doherty with Kyle Lowry for those 2 seasons and their coach. And they just told me, great stories of Kyle and what that team was like. They were like kind of like a traveling rock band that played all over the country against all the top teams and sold out gyms. And the best story was they were in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for a tournament, and they were bored. They actually borrowed the team van. The coach was like, "Go ahead, take the keys." And they drive to get something to eat at night. And next thing you know, walking out is the North Carolina men's basketball team who won the national championship that year. They were in town for a game too. And Kyle was like, "That's Raymond Felton." And they went up to them, and Kyle was like, "I want to play you right now, one-on-one." And Kyle Lowry, at this point, he's not Kyle Lowry. It's just a 18-year-old kid from Philly. And they're like, "Who the hell is this guy?" And they weren't joking. Like they were kids from Philly, and they wanted to play Raymond Felton one-on-one right there in the parking lot. And then eventually it dies down, and everybody goes their separate ways. But a year later, Kyle Lowry's in the Sweet 16 playing Raymond Felton in college, and next he's in the NBA, and it all kind of took off from there.
Wow, that's awesome. I can't wait to get a chance to check that one out. Matt, I appreciate it as always. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks a lot, Ray. Appreciate it, man. Take care.
You too. Matt Breen of the Philadelphia Inquirer on the Comcast Business Hotline. Comcast Business, every day in business is a big day. Let Comcast Business keep you ready for what's next. That's awesome. Love always reading Matt's stuff. I can't wait to check that one out. I didn't realize it came out this morning, so I'll be sure to give that one a read. And I love the idea of Kyle Lowry just, all right, this UNC team, they're a 10. We'll take them. I could take them one-on-one. I got Felton one-on-one. We'll reset. We'll react to that one. I like the end there. You catch the end there, Tom?
I did. Yes. Pretty good.
We'll talk about it. Get ourselves excited about it on the other side, and we'll reset the show a little bit as we get into the 1 o'clock hour here on the Midday Show. I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchunas here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Possibilities. 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com. Andrew Salchunas, 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
Welcome back. 97.5 The Fanatic. I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchunas here on the Midday Show. Leading you up to the best show ever coming your way at 2 o'clock. Tyrone Johnson, Rick Vitalico, and Jen Scordo. So we're going to react to what Matt Breen just had to say. I'd appreciate Matt coming on with us. It is a Breen day here on 97.5 The Fanatic Midday Show, as we enjoy having Matt Breen from the Philadelphia Inquirer. But, Tom, do you see this? Little fun little NBA. We mentioned the drama of the or fun little NFL. We mentioned the drama of the NBA. NFL tweet, Tyreek Hill.
I did not.
Him and Tua was special before me and will be special after I leave. What a fun little cryptic thing to say.
Say that again one more time.
Him and Tua was special before me and will be special after I leave.
So Tyreek Hill's planning on leaving.
I think he's just having fun.
Probably.
He's just having. I don't know. I mean, I said some people don't follow the day-to-day of the Eagles and, would be confused by something. Maybe I'm just not following the day of the Dolphins, and I'm just here reacting to it. But I do think it's a nice, fun thing to look at,
Listen, man.
To say.
NBA, NFL offseason makes it a lot more fun with how many podcasts and with social media now. So there's always something to respond and react to, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm just saying, it's an interesting thing to tweet out. Interesting thing to have to say. They still got to pay Tua. Waddle, I think, is coming up on his, because if
They're the same as Devontae,
yeah. Devontae's coming up on his deal, so Waddle's coming up on his deal.
Yep.
Tyreek, interesting. What is going on down in Miami? But to react there to Matt Breen, a couple of things that he got into and we talked about with him. The one that stuck out there was the one at the end. Was the Phillies thing about the not surprised. And listen, this is not us saying that they're going to go out there and make the big splash, get one of the remaining four that are the big names. Really, I would think it's down to three because I don't think Chapman would be one of the options for you. As much as and I'll say this with all due respect to the third baseman on this team, there are better third basemen. I saw the Major League Baseball came out with their top 10 list. Bohm was not part of it. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. People around here, how dare you? But true. But I imagine it'd be one of the other three, given what we've talked about, how thin the outfield could be if you don't feel good about Rojas or one of the starting pitchers, because the opportunity to add Montgomery or Snell is a wonderful thing.
Sure.
I'm not saying that Breen was saying it's going to be one of them, but that has to get you a little bit excited listening to him say, I wouldn't be surprised if, opening day, it's a month and a week, I think. It's the 28th of March, I believe, is the first game. So literally a month and a week. Wouldn't be surprised if, if there was someone else, if there was another addition, which I don't think anyone would be surprised. But it's an exciting thought of, hey, is there anything else they could do to make this team just a little better?
Yeah, he could have phrased it as, you could always have a chance when Dave Dombrowski's at the helm, but I think they really like their team. And I would be not surprised, but I would think that they like their team a little bit more than maybe some people do out there. If he phrased it that way, you would feel a little bit differently, but that's not how he phrased it. So, yeah, and it goes back to what we talked about yesterday, where they've been in on Yoshi Yamamoto, where they offered him more money than anyone in baseball to come play for the Philadelphia Phillies, and he decided not to. They were in on Jordan Hicks, big-time reliever from the Blue Jays, who ended up going to the Giants. Only reason he's not here is because the Giants paid him to be a starting pitcher, even though he's been a reliever his entire career, which is a dumb decision, in my opinion. Not for Hicks, Hicks, get your money, but for the Giants. They're also in on Stevenson, that relief pitcher that ended up going to, I forget where off the top of my head, because I forgot yesterday as well. Only reason that he did not sign with the Phillies is reportedly because he wanted to be closer to the West Coast, closer to home. So they've been in on all of these guys, and we've also seen what they did a couple years ago with, no, we're not fine with just Kyle Schwarber. We want to go out there and get Nick Castellanos as well because his market isn't as high as we thought. So knowing Dave Dombrowski, knowing the Phillies and how they operate, John Middleton willing to spend all of his money to make this team win, Yeah, I feel like I would be a bit surprised if something happened, but hearing so many people out there say they wouldn't be surprised makes me feel a little bit better.
Surprised? I think my gut, my feeling on this, like the way I look at it, I don't think I would be surprised to see it happen. It is not my expectation that something will happen.
I think that's a better way to phrase it.
Like it's one of those things where it's this team, what you expect from this or what you know about this franchise, you have been taught not to be surprised on that one. Do I make it my expectation? Am I sitting here saying, you know what? And we did the conversation about enough yesterday. Well, you know what? This offseason, it's not done. It's, they mentioned they're not actively looking for something. So it's not my expectation that something else gets done. But I don't know if I would be totally surprised by if they were able to go out there.
From what I've heard kind of all off season long, I don't know. I just feel like we would have. Can it just happen? Or like that's what it comes down to, man. We're a month away from the start of the baseball season. We are in spring training. Like, can this stuff just happen? Scott Boras, can you get over yourself, please? Like, can this just happen already? I love baseball. Love it. I know you do as well. I know a lot of people out there do listening to this show right now. Free agency is a problem. Like, this isn't a good thing for the sport, I don't believe. Like, if it's one or two guys kind of lingering, whatever, or one guy kind of lingering, like Harper took a while for him to sign. I understand that. We're in spring training now. These things should be kind of figured out by now. And it shouldn't be the top three of the top guys on the market like Snell, Montgomery, and Bellinger all out there as spring training is going on currently in all teams in Major League Baseball. So it's frustrating. That's why I think I'm kind of talking myself out of it a little bit.
So you're more frustrated with the process that you don't even want to deal with the idea of what this entails. Like you're frustrated with how long this is taking. You're more just get it over with and get it out of my mind.
And there's part of me that but when I hear a guy like Breen say that, when I hear someone like Jason Stark say that, you never always kind of be aware what the Phillies are in on, right? Never kind of count them out. Is that more just based on history? Or is that based on this situation we have right now? Like, are they saying that? I'm not saying that they're not doing their job correctly or anything like that, but is it more influenced because of the history of Dave Dombrowski rather than they're in on these guys in particular? Like, sure, are the Phillies maybe interested if one of these guys has to take only a one-year deal and then the Phillies swoop in? Maybe that's how Dave Dombrowski looks at it. Or are they looking at it as, hey, we want to get these guys done. They just have to come down to like 3 years rather than 6 years. I don't know. Part of me is not kind of buying this offseason being the season, this offseason being the offseason that Dave Dombrowski continues to make that surprise splash move late in the year.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if, as you say, buying, it's, again, for me, it's not the expectation at this point. I think a lot of us from our place, from where we are, put us in the circle beyond, the people that are doing this every day, with the team every day, talking to these people. I would say that my thought process is more wouldn't be surprised is what you explained early in that statement there, where you said, like, you're not surprised because of the history, because of what happened. And I think history does play a little bit in the informants of, like, okay, when they say this, what do they really mean about this? When he says he's not actively pursuing anything, does that mean they're done? Or does that mean that he is giving off the thought process that, hey, we don't need anything more, but hey, we're not actively looking for anything. If something comes falling to us, we're going to be right there ready to swoop and ready to make something happen. Because also, when he says that, when he shuts down that actively looking for something, to the other side, it's like, okay, well, if they're not actively looking for something, are they going to pay us X amount of dollars for our services, or is it going, are they going to, is there a market still for us that exists where we wanted to get paid? And I think it's tough. I mean, for the ones still out there, like, market's falling apart to what you expected at this point. Like, I can't imagine being Blake Snell right now. I mean, for a lot of reasons, for a multitude of reasons. Talent being one of the big ones, but also, the idea of how much we thought Blake Snell was going to get paid versus where he is at right now. And that's
they were projecting him to get more than Nola a lot of platforms before the offseason started. Nola got 172 top of my head. Blake Snell might not get 100 here. Like, honestly, realistically, depending on how long these deals are willing to go for, like, if he has to take a shorter term deal, even 3 years, that might not equal $100 million. So, yeah, to be a guy like Blake Snell or even a guy like Bellinger, who I saw a projection for $200 million before, and not just like some random dude on Twitter. No, from one of these sites that always does this every single year, that a well-respected baseball site. $200 million, 150 plus. Is Bellinger going to take a 2-year deal, like a Carlos Correa type? Like, what is going to happen with this? So, yeah, I couldn't imagine being any of these guys, mainly because of the athleticism that they have and the skill that they have and talent, but secondarily to I can't believe that they are in this situation that they're in.
Yeah, no, I can't believe. I can't imagine this being in that situation. I can believe it because I've seen it with baseball before, where these guys get
all three of these guys that, like I said, normally you see like one or two maybe, and even that second one is usually someone who's more of a fringe type guy. We're seeing 3 of the top 5, 6, 7 biggest names out there still without a team come spring training,
and it's going to be probably enough to push the needle in terms of the conversation of do we have to have a hard stop on free agency? Do we need to open up a window where this happens? Like part of being able to spend the way you can spend in baseball versus everything else allows for this to go on a little bit longer, because it's not like, I have to get my money before someone else takes my money, before someone else gets paid in that way, just because of the difference in cap versus luxury tax and all those things. And obviously for the length of time with this. Like, this is not an event the way NFL free agency, the way NBA free agency is. It's just a long, arduous process which you have to continue building towards.
How do you even change it, though? Like, is it something where you limit, like, you can't sign for more than 5 years or more than $150 million if it's not done by the first day of spring training? Like, something like that. I'm just throwing numbers out there. But, like, how do you fix that? Because guys are going to wait out and see and try and get the best deal physically possible for them. So there's probably a way to fix it. I don't know what it is. But for how great of a sport, for how great of talent, young talent base there is in baseball, and for how much fun playoff baseball can be, baseball still has some major problems the way they handle things, and I think free agency is one of them.
All right, well, to take you down to some of the news from Clearwater, I appreciate you pushing this towards me. Scott Lauber giving out some just updates. Brandon Marsh jogged today, start tracking pitches off of a virtual pitching machine tomorrow. So that's good news in that one, and that, he got cleaned up knee just days before they were supposed to be down there. Colby Allard is going to start the spring trading
opening day starter.
Yeah,
Colby Allard.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm thinking. That's why they brought him in, right? We all wanted them to go get a big lefty, right? That was the big offseason chatter. So good. And Aaron Nola going to start the Clearwater opener, which I got in this conversation with Bob Cooney while he was in here in one of the breaks early on in the show. Who do you think is going to start opening day for this team?
Nola's done it, the last 7 years, I believe?
Something like that.
My gut says Nola. He just signs this big contract. He's been the guy here for more than half a decade. It's not like obviously Zach Wheeler's fantastic, but it's not like Nola did anything to get that removed from him. Like, he was up and down last year, but it's not like he's completely fallen off a cliff where it hurts you if Aaron Nola is out there. As much as Wheeler, I believe Wheeler is the better pitcher and deserves it, I believe it's probably going to be Aaron Nola once again.
So I think it's Aaron Nola because they keep going with the tradition here. I would start Zach Wheeler just because he's my number one starter. Like, I get it. Tradition. Bob said, and this is why I said it was going to be Aaron Nola. Bob said it was going to be Zach Wheeler because he said, you know what? You sign that 7-year deal, you get all that money. It's like, guess what? You're going to be here for a lot of opening days. We've already had you start a lot of opening days. Let's put Zach Wheeler out there to start. I was like, yeah, it sounds great in theory, in principle. But personally, I think it's going to be, I think the way they operate will be Aaron Nola.
I think the only way they can do that is if Wheeler is signed long-term. Because how bad would it look potentially for Nola if you start every single opening day the last 6-7 years, you start every single opening day afterwards, but Wheeler starts this one this year and then potentially leaves in free agency the next season. Like that, and I don't know how much he puts into that.
I don't want to think about that.
That's not a good look, though. Yeah, but that's not necessarily a great look for the Philadelphia Phillies. If Wheeler's locked up long term, both these guys are going to be around here. Sure, give it to Wheeler. But because there's a question mark, just based on history, it kind of reminds me a little bit of when Eli Manning had that long streak of most starts in a row, and then they benched him one game for I think Geno Smith, and then Eli Manning starts the game right after that. That's kind of a bad look. I think it might be kind of a bad look for the Phillies, even though again I believe Zach Wheeler is the better pitcher and deserves it. I don't think it probably happens.
With all due respect to Eli Manning and the multi-time Super Bowl winning quarterback that he is, at that point in Eli Manning's career, It was a bad look to sit him. Absolutely. There is no comparison to Eli Manning at that level versus Zach Wheeler in the as a starter.
Not
right
the
now
perfect example, but it reminded me of it.
Right, I get what you're saying in terms of the look, the optic of it. It's like one of those fun things where it does matter, but it doesn't. I would love if they did now introducing your long-term Philadelphia Phillies ace here. We got a deal done with Zach Wheeler, and here's your starting pitcher on opening day. Like, it comes out a couple days before. I could imagine Dan Baker, going crazy, getting Wheeler out to the mound. Like, I would enjoy that. I would enjoy that type of theater. It's all about the theater for me. Outside of opening day, I'm more of an opening Saturday guy. I'll be honest. I'm one of the few people that like the opening Saturday. I don't like the day between because it makes me wait. But
like going to the game, or actually, I don't think I've ever been to an opening day game. I've been to multiple opening weekend games.
I love
I'm usually
Saturday.
a Saturday guy. Yeah.
Opening Saturday is my type of game. Opening day, I'll enjoy watching the theater. Opening Saturday, I'll get down there.
The day off is the dumbest thing in the entire world. It makes absolutely, and I get that it's because there's a chance of rain because it's so early on in the spring. Why? Why are you making us wait another? That was probably Scott Boris's idea. That's who I'm blaming it on.
Jeez. Well, I mean, I'm not the biggest Scott Boris guy in the world. I don't know how many there are, but the hatred you have here.
Well, it's, hate's a strong word, but like, Mike.
You just blamed him for the day between opening day and...
I can blame him for whatever I want to blame. Doesn't mean it's accurate, but I'm going to blame him for it.
Oh, geez.
I don't know.
Is he the reason that the Eagles locker room had problems?
You never know.
Is that what Craig Carton was teasing?
Could be the source.
Yeah. All right. And we got into, with Matt Breen, the contract extension. He said he would give it to Bryce Harper. An extension, he says, is a funny using of the phrase because he looks at it as just a raise. And I don't know. He mentioned wanting to play till he's 45. His contract would take him through the time that he is 38, 39. That's a considerable longer amount of time. I'm curious for people at 610-632-0975. When you hear this, when a guy who locked into a 13-year deal for $330 million, 5 years into that deal, says, you know what? I want more. I want more time. I want more money. I want to be here. I want to be a Philly forever, but I think I'm going to play until 45. When a guy who, has had injuries over the last couple of years claims he's going to play until 45. And hey, listen, the guy's a superhero. So I know he keeps himself in shape, the whole thing. But 45, it's a long time. It's a lot of investment. I'm curious on whether or not that is something that you would go about doing. Matt Breen said he would do it, mostly because it's Bryce Harper. The precedent it sets is a really, really interesting side of this, a branch of this piece. Not so much for what you've got in the Phillies, because I could tell you one person signed for longer than a decade by this organization that right now, after 1 year, does not have the leverage to ask for anything more. But what it would do for the rest of baseball, and particularly you look around at some of the teams that have signed these young players to contracts, are there players right now around baseball that are quietly cheering Bryce Harper on in this conversation? And how might that impact some of the teams that Phillies compete against? Because I got one that I could think of that I would think there's a nice crop of young players that probably when they look at their contracts and they look at their agents would say, wow, we are not going to be compensated for what we're worth in the coming years and are rooting for Bryce Harper right now.
Does he play for the Braves?
I'm not going to say that until after the break. Okay. But I'm not going to say that you're wrong either. We'll get into that conversation, whether or not you would get this done with Bryce Harper, whether or not you would go about doing it, and just the conversation about the rest of baseball and how this would go down for all of Major League Baseball if something like this were to happen. Would you do it? What are the after effects of it? We'll get into it. 610-632-0975. Our final segment to hang out here on the Midday Show before the best show ever comes your way at 2 o'clock. Plenty still to get into. We'll get back to some of the things we got into earlier in this show. Eagles, Sixers. And again, your phone calls at 610-632-0975. I'm Ray Dunn, taking you up until 2 o'clock. In for Andrew Salchunas right here on the Midday Show, 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
Crucial Eagles off.
thefanatic.com.
Hello.
Hello.
Relax. Please relax.
Hello.
Don't worry. I made it back.
Who?
I'm Ray Dunn, in for Andrew Salchunas here on the Midday Show, here on 97.5 The Fanatic. I got to go work things out with Mike Vito and some stuff set up for later on. Don't you worry, Tom Albert. I'm back. And we're here for you. One more segment. As you heard, yes, the best show ever coming your way at 2 o'clock. Tyrone Johnson, Ricky Metallico, and Jen Scordo. They get you through the 2 to 6 time slot here on The Fanatic, and plenty for them to get into, and something I know they got into a bit of yesterday, the contract for Bryce Harper. We talked about it in reacting to Matt Breen, but just an interesting pickle you find yourself in when a 13-year contract is signed. You're only 5 years into it. And the guy wants, again, the phrasing extension. Matt Breen saying he thinks it's more of a raise. But what would you do with it? I'm curious about that at 610-632-0975. Now, Tom, when you hear that, you hear the idea of the extension. I want the gut, because obviously we all, when we start sitting back and thinking about it, we could start working our way into the different sides of what it works. Matt says the two sides of the coin. What was the gut for you the first time you heard it? Because it was something that was brought up earlier this offseason by Boris on a podcast. What was the gut reaction the first time you heard it?
That Harper won an extension, correct?
Yes.
Why? Like, I understand why, but, like, why now was the big thing. Like, we already have a ton of signings that we potentially have to do. That was before Nola was re-signed, obviously. We had Zach Wheeler. There's talks of an extension, potentially still some offseason additions to be made here. And it's not like, you know, we did have a nice season last year. I had a lot of fun. It's not like you're coming off of a World Series ring and a World Series MVP. So that's a whole different story if that's the case. To me, it was, why now? Why are we dealing with this right now, especially when you have 8 years left and you're still just 31 years old? So that was my gut initial reaction. Love you, Hart, but why? And why right now?
That was awesome. At time and place. And it's still kind of that for me, where I'm sitting here today, like, why are we still... Like, why are we having this conversation? Why is this conversation a thing? I know why it is, but, like, why do we have to do it? And ultimately going down this path, I keep thinking of, is it going to get done? Likely, because it's Bryce Harper. Like, they don't want their star at all. Disappointed. Should it get done? Should it be something they do? And I am of the belief, like, hey, man, go get your money. This is pretty much goes to all players. So I don't necessarily have the issue that I know the owner side is going to have with this, where, like, this is just going to open up a massive can of worms. Like, okay, you signed this. You've now proven you're worth more than this. The one thing that they definitely have in their camp, like, I can guarantee you, once a day, instead of having, you know how Staples had the easy button? Instead of having the easy button, Boris has a button on his desk where he just replays that Middleton, oh, we're underpaying you clip. Every like once a day. If he's like picks up the phone, he gets a call about Montgomery, about Snell, it doesn't go well, puts the phone down, he's frustrated. He's like, what am I going to do? Like, what? How are we going to get these guys the money they deserve? And more importantly, how is Boris Corp going to get its next big millions and millions of dollars? And you know what he does? He looks on his desk, taps that button, the underpaid button.
Yeah. As soon as Middleton says that, they're screwed, but they're not screwed, because you're screwed in the sense of you're signing Bryce Harper to be a Philly for even longer than he is and making Bryce Harper happy, the superstar of the city. So you're not screwed in that way, but John Middleton's screwed in any type of negotiation, because as soon as the owner says, we underpaid you, and your client is Scott Boras, your client's agent is Scott Boras, it's kind of used as leverage against you.
Yeah. That you're pretty much, again, I remember that happening and hearing that and being like, well, that's a really interesting thing to just throw out there. Like, we know it. We all were aware of it. But, like, for it to be said, like, I'm not going to say I sat there and was like, they're going to ask for more money in a year and a half, and I'm going to have to deal with that. Like, no, I didn't think that we were going down this timeline, but it was like, oh, you really just said that right to his face. All right. That's one way to
And again, he's not wrong, as Matt Breen pointed out. Like, Bryce Harper is the face of this city. He's one of the faces of baseball. And yes, that $330 million, it's tough for people to look past. However, as Matt Breen brought up, and I don't know the exact number, but when it comes to annual amount of money made, Bryce Harper makes like 20-something million dollars a year. And that's like 40th around when it comes to annual value, or at least that's what Matt Breen thought it was. So is Bryce Harper, should he be paid more than the 40th best player in baseball, highest paid player in baseball? He probably should be in the top 10, top 15. He's not. So, of course, he is underpaid technically when it comes to annual value, but years-wise and contract as a whole, it's tough to say someone's underpaid at $330 million.
Bryce Harper, annual by year. So the AAV. You want to guess the two players that he's in between?
No, because I'll sit here and get Xander Bogaerts is one of them.
That is one of them.
Look at that.
Look at you.
Xander Bogaerts, and that's all I got.
I mean, that's good that you had one of them. There's how many players in the bigs? How many guys on that many contracts? Yeah, okay, so that was good.
No, never mind.
No?
No.
What was it?
Don't forget I even said anything.
Come on, say it. Why not? What do you have to lose here?
Because Reese didn't get paid. It's not Reese, is it?
No, it's not Reese.
Oh, I was going to say, I was trying to think of the contract.
No, I was going to let you walk out of that Reese comment. I was going to let you walk into someone else there. But you got one.
Xander Bogaerts. I got that right.
Xander Bogaerts and Dansby Swanson.
Okay.
Those are the two guys.
A big contract.
Bogaerts is like 70,000 more, and Swanson's like 100,000 less. So basically, you're paying Bryce Harper a little less than Bogaerts, and a little more than Dansby Swanson.
And what's that number at?
That number, the AAV on Spot Track, $25.3 million.
Do you have the ranking of what that is in baseball?
That would be 28.
Okay, so not quite 40, but I believe Bryce Harper is better than the 28th player in baseball, personally.
Well, it's lucky you say that because Major League Baseball, they're top 100. They're continuing to roll this out. Andrew congratulated me, actually, at the end of last week with you'll be able to react to this next week. Well, guess what we're going to do? We're going to react to it this week because he came in 11th, which is probably fitting for the fact that he did, missed the first month or so. He missed, the first, 6 weeks of last season.
And also didn't get that power back until the last month or two of the year.
So, yeah, I could see where he comes in there. By the way, Bryce already down to 8th in the total value of his contract.
And by the way, there's still, I don't think it's going to happen, at least years-wise, but there's a chance that he's even lower and falls out of the 20s because Snell, Montgomery, and Bellinger all have to sign. Like, they're not going to make the 13 years, but annually might be higher than the $25 million.
That's right. He falls past 30. But you mentioned that where he is, and we will get back to exactly whether you would do the contract change, whether you would not rip up, but alter the contract or not. But it was something that we had put on to talk about at some point today with the top 100. Harper comes in 11th. He's up 6 spots from 2023. Great. Trey Turner was 11th last season. He falls to 16th. I understand it's a sign of respect for Trey Turner to keep him in that top 20, and it's a sign of like what his abilities are. Putting him at 16th after last season is the ultimate. We've got faith in you, dude. Hey, thumbs up. Good luck. We got you. That last 2 months of your season is really indicative of what we think you are. Because there are much more than 15 players where you would say after last season had better seasons and, career-wise are tracking in a direction better than Trey Turner.
Yeah, that was probably the thing I was most, I disagreed with the most, I would say, with this list. Like Harper, of course, like when he's at his best, he's the best player in baseball other than Shohei Ohtani because he just does it both ways. Like we saw what he can do come playoff time and just completely carry a team. However, when you look back to last season coming into this year, he wasn't healthy all of last year, didn't get that power back till later. So I'm okay-ish with the 11 for Bryce Harper. 16, and look, I would do that contract again most likely. I think it's a good thing that Trey Turner is here. I think Trey Turner has a nice bounce-back season. How can you say Trey's the 16th best player in baseball after last year? That was a bit shocking to me as well.
Yeah.
I'm not saying drop him out of the top 100, but 16?
No, because that was what we got into last week where it's like, okay, Turner still hasn't come up. He was 11th last year. He's an electrifying baseball player, can do a lot of different things. The defense last year was
He's working on it, though.
yeah, good. I don't mean to sound like Mr. Fundamental over here, but that guy should be working on his defense every day seriously, after last year.
I think was number 1 in errors 2 years ago, and I think top 5, top 10 in errors last year in all of baseball. Not trending the right way, so
No.
hopefully we take those grounders.
Well,
there,
luckily
Trey.
he was doing so well at bat last year,
Yes,
right?
that's a very good point.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course. Oh, yeah. It's a nice sign of respect. But last week when we saw that he had not yet been unveiled and they only had the top 20 left, it was hard to imagine a world where he dropped out of the top 100. But it's also hard to imagine a world where, after watching last season with a middle infielder that's considerably struggled defensively over the last, 2 years, really, and, looking at who he is as a player and where he's headed, like, age-wise, where you sit here and say he's 16th in baseball. I get a little concerned on that. Like, I look at that one, I'm like, ooh, yeah, that's a ranking that, if we want to talk about one that might not age well with it, like, Bobby Witt comes in at 20. Like, we start working down, like, some of the shortstops here.
Really?
Yeah.
So Trey's ahead of Bobby Witt Jr.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, look, Bobby Witt Jr. has to prove it over time. He's just had a couple good seasons. But when you're talking about coming into this season, like, I don't know. To me, that's surprising to me. I'll say that.
It's a good way to put it. It's a good way because, again, it's a respect to his career. Bobby Witt last season had a nice season, and quite a nice season. I think nice is underselling it. Yeah. 30 bombs. He led the league in triples. I don't know if did he get to 50 steals? He might have been close to that, something. But again, had a very nice season. And if he puts on the career path of Trey Turner for the next 7 years, you could talk about putting it past him. It's a respect to Trey Turner's career, but it is one of those only 5 spots. You watched that first half, really first 4 months of his season, dropped 5 spots. That was the biggest one I had questions with. Nola dropped out of the top 100 entirely, which was something we knew. Well, we didn't know, but we assumed when he was 79th last year and he hadn't been shown last week when we got to the top 20. Last season didn't exactly inspire a move up, but him dropping basically 21-plus spots out of the top 100. I understand, people are like, well, you just talked about Trey Turner's last season like that. You got to mention Nola's last season like that. Yeah, you're right. So can understand him moving back 21 spots. Schwarber dropped 13 spots over his season from last year.
Had a pretty similar season to the one he did 2 years ago, didn't he?
Yeah, so that was one where I was like, really? Is that, I guess it's more of a nod to kind of a fatigue of Schwarber, maybe, of like, hey, we know what he can do. There's other guys that are moving up. Actually, compare the 2 seasons. More home runs than 2022. More RBIs than 2022. 20 points better in the OBP. Slugging was down a little bit. The OPS was down a little bit because of the slugging. Okay, I could see.
That was average compared. No, I'm saying because I don't remember what he hit 2 years ago. Truly, it was like
he hit 218 2 years ago.
And he hit what, 200? No, he was below 2 to finish out the season.
How soon we forget he hit 197.
Well, look, maybe they put more weight into batting average than some other people out there.
Yeah. And I guess, we have to remember, we talked about Turner's defense. Schwarber now, you imagine the bulk of the time will be the designated hitter. So.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be seeing much of Schwarber in left field this year.
I really would believe so. We really hope not.
Well, you still have to get JT DH every now and then. You still have to get, of course, Harper DH coming off a major injury still. Like, maybe even Castellanos they throw in there. But I can't see it being more than 20 starts. I'll throw out a number there. 20 starts. It's going to happen.
So if we go games by position last year, break it down for you. 103 in left field. He went 57 as the designated hitter. If we went, how many outfield starts he made? Let's say you said 20. Yeah, 25 would be my ceiling for that. I think if it gets any higher than that, there's something else that's gone with this team that we did not foresee.
Other than an injury, yeah. Like if you get an injury that keeps, one of these guys out for an extended
They can't
period of
play
time.
in the field
Yeah,
again.
exactly. Then you have something to maybe to think about there if you're the Philadelphia Phillies. But yeah, there's a reason that they did not re-sign Rhys Hoskins, and that's because they do not want Schwarber in the field. They want him in the DH spot. So yeah, we're not going to be seeing a ton of them, but some of them in left field.
Now JT also dropped 17 spots.
So he went from 29 in 2023 to 46 this year, 46th best player in baseball. JT does more than just hitting, as we all know. Obviously has speed on the base pass, really good defensive catcher. I feel like it should be lower than that, JT. Still think he might have a bounce back season. Still a unicorn when it comes to what he can do as a catcher compared to what a lot of catchers can do around baseball, but it's tough for me to say JT's a top 50 player in baseball based on what I saw last season. At the plate, at least.
Of the 4 guys who dropped, Nola, Schwarber, Realmuto, and Turner. Nola drops out of the top 100 entirely. Rhys was also in the top 100 last year as a Philly. Obviously, I'm best of luck, Rhys. You're not I'm not doing the whole, well, how far will he rise come next season? I hope you do, but it doesn't have much to do with us. Trey Turner, JT, Schwarber, Nola. Which one of those 4 is most likely to bounce back upwards come next season?
Eagles need to. That's the wrong button. That's the box spread button.
That's okay. Hey, listen, I was like, I did think I asked about the Phillies, but hey, Eagles talk does numbers.
Ask that question again.
Yeah, the top 4, the 4 guys that fell: Nola, Schwarber, Realmuto, Turner. Which one makes the ride? Which one bounces back in the upward direction come next season?
I think Trey Turner has the best season of all of them next year. Now, I don't know how much more he can bounce up because of the list, because he's 16. I don't know if he's going to go to number 4 best player in baseball.
Bad year.
Yeah, but I think Trey Turner has the best season. I could see Nola taking the biggest jump up on that list, where he's not even on it. When Nola's on, he's one of the top 15, 20 pitchers in baseball, if not higher. Trey Turner has the best season next year, but I believe Nola takes the biggest jump in that list.
So I would say Nola is my. Well, I'd not even forget the jump. Nola gets back in the top 100 this year. That's the one that I am most convinced will rise back up. I'm not convinced Turner or Realmuto go further back up. And say, well, why do you care so much about a list? Why do you care about so much why they're jumping up in the list? Well, they have to have good seasons to have it back. So this is more of an exercise of thought of who's going to be the one having the best season as it relates to looking at that top 100 of a list. I would say that Nola is the one that I expect out of the 4 to have the biggest of those seasons. Schwarber, do I expect him to hit 40-plus bombs again? Do I expect him to be leading off again? And, us to have that dialogue all season long again?
Which we will.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I will welcome that, absolutely. But I think he has a similar season where it's, maybe he gets the benefit because he's not in the field. It's like, okay, we didn't have to think about him in the field, so maybe you like what you see a little bit better. It'd be great if he hit 200, but ultimately his OBP, it's great because last season his on base goes up, but he hits under 200, and it's like I said about the Whit Merrifield signing. It's a nice tell of what you think about baseball, what you believe about baseball, for the way you feel about the way last season went. And then JT, like you said, it's not that he's bad. It's just that the BCIB thing. I think that one's finally run its course.
Yeah, you look at some of the other catchers around the league. Rutschman, talk about a guy like Will Smith. There's other good catchers. I think JT, Father Time is starting to catch up with him, unfortunately. And I don't know how much less he's going to be playing. This is something that bothers Ricky all the time. JT needs to be playing less. This is a guy who's in his 30s catching more innings than anyone in baseball, and by a lot over the last couple of seasons. Maybe to help out him at the plate and prolong his career, not just for last season, but going forward, maybe it'd be smart to give him a little bit less work behind the plate and work in the field as a whole. And I don't think the Phillies have any plans on doing that. I think it's going to be Garrett Stubbs catches 20 games a year, and JT's catching 130 plus.
Which, again, goes back to Stubbs. Vibes guy, DJ guy. He's everybody's favorite when things are going well, but in terms of when you're talking about building the roster, I remember the conversation, and I think it was Kevin Cooney and I on the weekend in a crossover. We're talking after the season. What are you looking at? Well, yeah, you can upgrade backup catcher. Do I think they will upgrade a backup catcher?
And the big question is, how much can you really upgrade a backup catcher? Stubbs is He's no JT Realmuto. I'll say that. But, like, how many great backup catchers are there out there in baseball that can do multiple things? Sure, you have a guy that can call a good game, but what's he going to be hitting you? Like, what did Stubbs hit last year? It was probably under 200. I think a lot of backup catchers in baseball, backups, are hitting low twos and hitting barely 10 home runs. Like, Stubbs, you can absolutely upgrade. You're right, but how big of an upgrade is that? And do the Phillies see it being worthwhile because of what Stubbs brings to the locker room and how much time that backup catcher is actually going to get?
Which is the only one. He's the one where I absolutely believe in the here for vibes type of thing. You know, we talk about it a lot with people. I truly believe that is legitimately his role. Like, he can he's a catcher. Yeah, he can catch. You know, he bats left-handed. You know, but I legitimately will. That is, like, this is not Radio Man bit. Like, I really truly believe.
If he didn't have that playlist, if he wasn't the team DJ, there's a chance he's probably going by now.
And it's got to be Bryce, right? He's got to be. Bryce has to love him, right?
Yeah, I'm sure he's loved in that locker room. I think.
Well, I mean, we talk about, like, if this was a band, it'd be Bryce and Buddies. Like, that's what it would be called.
Sure.
Yeah. Like, he's the lead man. You know, this is his band here.
Yes.
It would have to. Bryce is the one. Like, if Bryce looked around at the locker room after last offseason and was like, hey, like, looked around and looked at everyone's performance and said, okay, where can we upgrade this roster? Backup catcher logically would be one of the places where he probably, you know, like, not for nothing. And this is, again, an organization decision. I'm going to say I believe there was some of it that goes into Bryce's. Like, Bryce obviously had a big say in this one. Much as he might have liked Rhys Hoskins, the guy, if first base is better for him long term, and they believe it's better for him long term, Hoskins is gone. Hoskins, in terms of production versus the production that you get from, you know, again, a backup catcher, like, you know, you would like maybe a little bit of an upgrade catcher. Bryce wants something to happen. I imagine it happens. If he's like, you know what, that guy's fine, I think they'd listen.
Yeah, probably. I think Bryce probably is a fan of a guy like Garrett Stubbs. And again, it kind of goes back to, like, how much are you really upgrading? Is it going to be worth it because of your plan with JT Realmuto this season not really changing and the lack of actually, I said good, like actually average backup catchers out there in baseball. So, yeah, unfortunately for some people out there, Garrett Stubbs isn't going anywhere.
So we mentioned Harper in, you know, getting what he wants. One, do you think he gets the extension, raise, whatever it is? Two, would you do it if you were the Phillies?
Would I do it? I think it's probably, when it comes to the Phillies, they're not really worried about what hasn't been done. Like, I know a lot of fans are like, why would he get it when he has all this time left on his contract, when he still hasn't won a World Series? I think the Phillies view it as, this guy picked us. This guy's the face of this city, face of this franchise. We need to keep him as content and happy as possible. We don't want this lingering into the offseason. We don't want this being a story on the radio all season long. I think that they probably get this done. I would think it's probably done. I truly believe they get this one done. I think Wheeler maybe goes into the season a little bit. I think the Harper thing does get done, though.
Oh, so you think Harper gets done before Wheeler?
Well, when you phrase it like that, because that's not a good look for Wheeler now. Like, wait, you extended this dude who has 8 years left on his contract,
Which
but not me?
Which is the time and place of this thing.
But there's also negotiating going on. Like, maybe they offer something to Wheeler and he just doesn't accept it. I think it gets done. Now you have me kind of backtracking that a little bit. But I think, would I do it? I would probably wait and see next season. Like, hey, let's let this linger another season. If I'm the Phillies, I think they probably just kind of nip it in the bud and get this thing done with.
I think it gets done. I don't think I would do it. I think you're walking a really, really, like, I'm all for him pursuing it. I want this to be clear. Like, I'm not against him. Like, if he wants to pursue it, I would look at it like, yo, like, let's get, and these conversations probably aren't happening in this way. You know, it's not going to be this cut and dry with it. But from my perspective, I want to see this guy, you know, want to see that the health continue here. I know we're protecting the long-term viability of him at first base. That's what they believe they're doing. But just giving him the extension, giving him that with 8 years already still left to go. I mean, come on here. Like, the one thing that I will enjoy from this, if they do it, is the ripples it sends. Because now everyone's going to have to deal with this. Now everyone, like, this new, to steal the phrase from Dougie P, this new normal, the new norm that'll be in baseball. I would love to see all the Braves young players say, wait a second. He was able to do that in Philadelphia. We could do that. That's our thing. That's what's happening in baseball now. And that'll be, you want the next big big problem baseball's going to have on their hands. All these long-term deals to keep guys in place with all the money guaranteed. Oh, wait a second. We could just rip it up. We could just say, no, wait. I want something more. Like right now, Ronald Acuna is going to make $17 million this year. $17 million.
Could argue he's the second best player in baseball behind Ohtani right now. And you could argue he's better than him right now technically because Ohtani can't pitch.
And, yeah, that's true.
Just for this season.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
You could argue, yeah. And, when they unveil, I don't know where the top 10, they haven't done the top 10 yet. So when they unveil that, I imagine that he will be amongst that. They also have Austin Riley, they have 15th in that. Like, Acuna, if he ends up, it's like, I got 2 club options at the end of this. $17 million all the way through to the end of that. Yeah, you took care of me during arbitration, but guess what? If I were to hit the open market, which I believe this would have been his final year of arbitration, or this into this year would have been his final year, so I think he would have been a free agent after this one or after the next. How much could I have made? How much am I missing out on? Okay, you think I want some more money?
Do you have his full contract details right there? Not just the per year, but how much he actually signed for?
He signed for 2028 is the second club option on.
Okay, so
that's $17 million.
And what's that contract as a whole? Do you have it in front of you?
As a whole, it is $100 million over 8 years.
Okay. Mm-hmm. If Ronald Acuna Jr. was a free agent after this year and he was healthy next season, even if he had a little bit of a down season, if he was healthy, he's getting $400 million. He's getting 10 years, $400 million. Because, again, he is arguably the best player in baseball. Still at a young age, at mid-20s, I believe is what he is. So, yeah, I could see him being a bit unhappy. And, look, he did sign the contract, as you mentioned, but things change, especially if Bryce Harper decide things change and the Phillies decide things change. Yeah, this could have quite the ripple effect, as you mentioned.
Right, and that's the one thing that, my cynical mind, it intrigues me. Where it's like, you know what, I don't think this is the route I would pursue with a guy that I have questions about. You've mentioned it. He was healthy at the end. That's why we don't necessarily have the conversations about his health. But he has been banged up from year to year. I imagine first base, part of that is, it's, again, long-term viability is what they talk about. Do I think a guy that's already got 8 years that's going to take him through his entire 30s that I'm just throwing an extension out there? No. Ultimately, do I think that I would lose in a game of hardball against Bryce Harper and Scott Boras? Yeah, probably. I'd probably cave, and I understand why they're going to end up doing it, probably, when this is all said and done. But my first firm reaction to it is no. I can't imagine. I can't justify this one to myself.
Which one out of these 3 options, what do you think is the most likely to happen before the season starts? Extend Wheeler, extend Harper, sign one of the big-time free agents still out there. What do you see most likely?
Extend Wheeler.
That's the most likely?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. That's the one I think most likely of all those. Also, by the way, Austin Riley, another one that's making $22 million. You could argue is the best third baseman in baseball.
Yeah, it's just the Braves having some type of voodoo magic. I don't know what it is, and just talking these people. Scott Kingery made more money than Ozzie Albies last year. Think about that. I don't know what they do. I don't know how they do it. I understand Spencer Strider's a guy who's locked up long-term, too, for them. They're good at what they do. I don't know how they convince these young superstar players to do it.
Ozzie Albies is going to make $7 million this year. He will. If you see that Bryce Harper thing go through, you got to imagine. That's the one thing. That's, again, my little messed up brain up here. That's the one thing that I'm sitting there like, you know what? I would love if it happened for this team to end up being the reason the Braves have to. But would they answer to it? Would the Braves organization cave to all of them? Is a better question. And what would their steps be to ensure they do? I just like the chaos. That would be the chaos. In a show where we talked about theatrics, that's some theatrics I'm interested in. All right, we're just about out of here. I want to let you know again, our 1 o'clock hour is brought to you by Ferguson HVAC Line Conklin. Attention HVAC contractors for equipment, parts, and supplies for every heating and cooling job. Visit one of Ferguson's counter locations in Bensalem, King of Prussia, Pennsauken, or Westchester. Tom, this was fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Very much.
Just happy to be here. Now, fun 3 days. The next 2 days, As, again, no Andrew this week. He's enjoying some well-earned relaxation. It will be Connor Thomas and Silvana Keller taking you through the midday show as you got some Sixers going on over the next 2 days. And, I'm off to the other gig. So we got plenty still to come for in the middays. I'm excited to listen from afar. Of course, I'm excited to listen coming up at 2 o'clock, the best show ever with Tyrone Johnson, Ricky Metallico, and Jen Scordo. I know they got plenty in store for you. We got into quite a bit today. I want to thank again Gina Mizell and Matt Breen for joining the show. And Lil Birdie told me you might be able to re-listen to those tonight on Fanatic Extra. I'm just telling you, the 6 o'clock hour, you might be able, if you missed them, 97.5thefanatic.com. Great way to listen to them. Fanatic Extra tonight because the Flyers are back tonight after a couple of nights off. So you'll be able to listen to that game here tonight after Fanatic Extra in the 6 o'clock hour, after the best show ever, 2 to 6. Which is coming your way next. Tyrone Johnson, Ricky Metallico, Jen Scordo coming your way. As for me, I'm Ray Dunn. I appreciate you all for listening. I hope to talk to you again real soon right here on 97.5 The Fanatic.